You've been told that you're behind, that you should be further by now, that your life should look different, more successful, more exciting, more like them. But if that were true, why do you still feel tired even while running? Why does something still feel off even when you're doing everything right? Why does peace feel so far away? The truth is, you're not late, you're not lost, you're not missing anything. You are exactly where you need to be. And Buddhist wisdom has known this all along. Tonight, you're not just going to sleep, you're going to wake up to something deeper, a knowing that's always been there, buried under the noise. These aren't just ideas, they're soul truths, spoken by awakened minds who saw through the illusion, who knew that life isn't about getting somewhere, but seeing where you already are. As you listen, the pressure will soften, the self-doubt will begin to fade. You'll stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start feeling still, whole, held. The racing thoughts will slow, the weight on your chest will ease, and somewhere inside, something will whisper, "You're okay. You've always been okay." This isn't just another audio to help you sleep. This is the undoing of the lie that you're behind. This is the beginning of trust, of coming home to the present moment and finally understanding why it's perfect. Are you ready? Let's begin. Absolutely. Below is the cleanly rewritten and properly arranged 3,000-word section for the karmic precision of the present moment, in the exact writing style and emotional tone you requested, flowing directly from the introduction, using simple English with no repetition and no chapter headings. Before we begin, take a breath. Not because it's trendy or spiritual, but because you've probably been holding it all day. Holding it through deadlines, overthinking, scrolling, silence, noise, all of it. This breath is the only thing that's been quietly holding you. And now, in this moment, it's the only thing that matters. Because what if everything that led you to this moment wasn't random? What if nothing was out of place, including you? Tonight, we're going to slow everything down. Not just your thoughts, but the deeper current running underneath them. That low, constant hum that says, you should be further by now, that your life should look more exciting, that something went wrong somewhere and you missed your chance. That voice, it's a lie. The truth is, you're not late. You're not off track. And nothing about where you are right now is accidental. In Buddhist wisdom, this moment isn't judged by how perfect it looks, but by how real it is. And this one? It's real. Not just because you're here listening, but because it's part of a pattern, an unfolding that goes deeper than logic, deeper than plans. It's the karmic unfolding of everything that came before. Karma isn't the dramatic lightning bolt people think it is. It's not cosmic punishment. It's not revenge from the universe. Karma is precision. It's not emotional. It's mathematical, quiet, constant, exact. Every thought, every word, every small choice, no matter how invisible, has ripple effects. Not in a scary way, in a revealing way. This moment, it's not happening to you. It's unfolding through you. If you've ever felt like life just keeps circling back to the same emotions, the same struggles, the same kind of people, there's a reason. Not because you're cursed, not because the universe is cruel, but because karma doesn't give up. It brings back the lesson until you stop running and face it. Until you see clearly what was once blurred by fear or pride or the need to control. And once you see it, not just with your eyes but with your heart, everything softens. You stop blaming, you stop comparing, you stop needing to escape. Karmic precision means this moment is not a detour, it's not a mistake, it's a mirror, showing you what you've been carrying, what you've avoided, what you're finally strong enough to meet. Not all karma looks like drama. Sometimes it's subtle, like being constantly overlooked, like the slow fading of a dream you once swore would be your future, like quiet disappointment that keeps finding new costumes to wear. That too is karma, not as payback, but as curriculum. The kind you didn't sign up for, but that's shaping something inside you that's stronger than ambition, wiser than regret. You're not being tested, you're being taught, not by a punishing force, but by a perfectly timed sequence of causes and conditions designed for your growth. Karma doesn't work by intention alone. It works by attention. What you feed grows. What you face changes. And what you accept, fully without resistance, transforms. Think of a seed planted long ago, a thought, an action, a habit. Maybe you forgot about it. But karma didn't. It's patient. It waits. And when the conditions are right, that seed blooms. It might look like loss, like stillness, like confusion, but it's blooming all the same. And when you stop resisting, you start receiving. Receiving the clarity you didn't know you needed, the courage you didn't know you had, the peace that comes from finally seeing life as it is, not as you wished it would be. There's a line in the Buddhist texts, "The mind precedes all things," meaning the life you see is shaped not by luck, not by chance, but by the quality of your perception. Change how you see this moment, and the moment changes shape. You might ask, but what about all the pain? That too is part of it, not as punishment, but as a wake-up call. Pain arrives when the path you're on no longer fits the version of you that's evolving. It breaks things open. It shows you what was never solid to begin with. It reveals attachments that were silently choking you. Karma doesn't show you what you deserve. It shows you what's unfinished. It brings to the surface whatever needs to be completed, fully felt, fully learned, fully released. That argument that keeps replaying in your head, that job that ended suddenly, that person you can't forget, even though they've moved on. Karma isn't keeping you stuck there. Attachment is. Karma is just holding up the mirror, letting you look, letting you choose whether to keep carrying it or finally set it down. This moment, right here, is the result of thousands of little moments you forgot mattered, all converging now into an opportunity, an invitation to respond differently, to feel something more fully, to stop postponing peace. And yes, sometimes karma isn't even yours alone. Sometimes you carry the weight of ancestors, collective trauma, societal patterns, but even those find you for a reason, not to crush you, but because maybe you're the one strong enough to stop the cycle. So the frustration you feel, the heaviness, the longing, it's not a flaw in the system, it is the system, bringing you the exact experience that fits the shape of your soul right now. Not to hold you down, but to show you what freedom really is. Because freedom doesn't come from everything going right. It comes from knowing you don't need everything to go right to feel peace. It comes from seeing this moment, not as a placeholder, not as a mistake, not as something to tolerate, but as the exact thing you were meant to experience. Not because you failed, but because you're ready. There's nothing random about this. If you're in a season of waiting, there's karmic intelligence there. If you're in a season of letting go, that too is precision. If you're finally feeling what you avoided for years, that is timing at its most sacred. You are not off course. Even the parts of your life that feel broken are breaking open, not breaking down. Even the silence is speaking. Even the mess is medicine. Even your restlessness is part of the path. When you drop the story that things should be different, karma starts to shift. Not because you manipulated it, but because you finally saw it clearly, without judgment, without panic, without the need to run. And that clarity, it becomes the seed for new karma, new experiences, not by force, but by alignment. That's the secret. Karma is not about what happens next. It's about how you meet what's happening now. Meet it with resentment, and the pattern returns. Meet it with resistance, and the lesson tightens. Meet it with presence, and the energy changes, quietly but completely. The ones who understand this don't have perfect lives. They have eyes that see deeper. They know this truth. Life isn't happening randomly. It's unfolding precisely. Every delay, every connection, every emotion, all of it, part of the exact path your soul needed to walk. Right now, as your body softens and your mind starts to slow, let this truth land in your heart. There is nothing wrong with this moment, and there is nothing wrong with you for being in it. The unfolding is intelligent, the timing is right, the lesson is waiting to be received, not avoided. You're not here by accident. You're not listening to this by coincidence. Something brought you here, something exact, something ancient, something wise, and it's still unfolding through you, gently, unstoppably, perfectly. No more running, no more fixing, just presence, just trust. Rest now. The karma that brought you here knows what it's doing. You are exactly where you need to be. And just like that, it starts again. The feeling that this can't be it. That something is missing. That somewhere else, some other version of life, is waiting for you. Quieter, richer, easier, better. The mind starts planning, escaping, reaching. Not because you're ungrateful, but because it's been taught that peace lives in the next place, the next job, the next relationship, the next version of you. But what if that craving is the very thing keeping you from the life you already have? You've already seen that where you are is no accident, that karma places you in precise positions for growth, not punishment. But what happens when the mind refuses to stay there? When everything inside you whispers that this can't be the destination? That's where we meet the next illusion. One of the most seductive forms of suffering dressed up as ambition, hope, or even healing. It's the craving to be elsewhere. In Buddhist wisdom, this craving isn't just an innocent longing. It's a form of dukkha, a subtle but deep unrest that arises not because life is painful, but because the mind insists that something else would be better. It turns ordinary moments into problems and the present into something to escape from. It's not just dissatisfaction, it's a habit of mental abandonment. The mind says, maybe if I lived in a different city, I'd be happy. Maybe if I had a different partner, a better job, a new identity, maybe then I could breathe. And so you chase. Not with your legs, but with your thoughts. With that constant search for the future as salvation. But what you're really doing is disconnecting from your body, from your life, from the only place where truth lives. The problem with craving a better situation is that it seems so noble. It wears the mask of growth. It sounds like vision. It feels like motivation. But underneath, it's often rooted in the belief that where you are now is unacceptable, that you, as you are unfinished, that peace is somewhere out there instead of right here. This is where the suffering begins, not in your actual life, but in the thought that there's a better one waiting. A thought that makes the present feel small. A thought that rejects what's real in favor of a fantasy. And fantasies always come with a cost. Because even if you reach the better job, the perfect partner, the quieter home, you'll carry with you the same restless mind, the same belief that something is missing, the same hunger for more. Until you finally learn that it was never about the situation. It was about the attention you were giving it. To want something else is not a problem. To believe that something else will finally complete you, that's the trap. And it's one of the hardest to see because it hides behind productivity, self-help, even spirituality. There's a term in Buddhism called tanha, which means thirst or craving. Not just physical craving, but the mental thirst to not be where you are. To upgrade the moment, to replace it with something shinier. This thirst keeps the wheel of suffering spinning. It tells you, just a little more and you'll finally be okay. But the more never comes, because the more is built on the belief that now is never enough. Think about how many times you've told yourself, once I get through this week, things will calm down. Once I get that call, that offer, that clarity, I'll be able to breathe. But breathing doesn't wait for the future. It happens here, or not at all. The trap is so subtle because it feels personal. Like your restlessness is a sign that something is wrong with your path. But what if it's not? What if the restlessness is just your mind's refusal to settle into what is already whole? This doesn't mean you should never move, grow, or change. But there's a difference between movement that comes from clarity and movement that comes from running. One is rooted in presence. The other is rooted in rejection. When you crave a better moment, you abandon yourself. You say, this version of me isn't worthy of love or attention. Only the future me deserves peace. That's the ultimate self-betrayal, because it means your worth is conditional on achievement, appearance, understanding, control. But worth, in the truest sense, has no conditions. It's not earned. It's remembered. The craving to be elsewhere also weakens your capacity to learn. When the mind is always chasing, it can't receive. You miss the wisdom that's embedded in the moment because you're already looking past it. You miss the insight, the pattern, the healing that only comes when you stay. Not stay physically, stay mentally, stay emotionally, stay with the discomfort long enough to let it open. In Zen, they say, when walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. But above all, don't wobble. Wanting to be elsewhere is the ultimate wobble. It splits your awareness. Half of you is in the now. The other half is in a world that doesn't exist. And that split is exhausting. It's what causes the tightness in your chest, the fog in your mind, the feeling of being everywhere and nowhere at once. You don't need a better life to feel peace. You need a better relationship with the life you already have. That begins by no longer calling this moment insufficient. Notice how often your mind resists where you are. The waiting room, the silence, the difficult task, the meal that isn't perfect, the moment someone doesn't respond the way you hoped. The craving to fix it all starts instantly, but presence means staying. Presence means choosing not to reach for the exit, even when it's uncomfortable. This is not about settling, it's about seeing clearly. Because the more you're able to be fully here, the less you're manipulated by what could be. And the less you're manipulated, the freer you become. Sometimes you're not really looking for a better situation. You're looking for permission to feel safe in your current one. But that safety doesn't come from rearranging the outside. It comes from holding steady on the inside. Wanting to be elsewhere is not just a thought, it's a feeling in the body. The anxious fidget, the mind spinning toward future scripts, the breath that won't drop into your belly. You can't outthink your way into presence. You have to drop into it, through sensation, through stillness, through meeting what's here with kindness instead of criticism. Every time you resist this moment, you delay your own clarity. You put off your own awakening. Because the wisdom doesn't live in the next phase, it lives in the precise emotions, people and patterns that are here now. Whether you like them or not, whether you asked for them or not, whether they're comfortable or not. The truth is, most people never stop craving the next thing. That's why they never really land in their lives. They're always one step removed, always half in, half waiting, half hoping. And life doesn't open to people who aren't fully present. Not because it's withholding, but because it can't connect with someone who's not actually there. You don't need to get somewhere better. You need to be where you are better, not by changing the scenery, but by deepening your gaze. This moment might not look how you wanted, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It might be quieter than you hoped, more chaotic than you planned, but it's never random. This moment is the only one with enough information to change your life, not the one in your head. This one, right now, with all its mess, all its silence, all its imperfection. Craving takes you out of that truth. It says, somewhere else holds what you seek. But Buddhism teaches that seeking is the beginning of suffering, not because you shouldn't want joy, but because you already have access to it. It's just buried beneath the habit of skipping this moment in favor of the next. Let go of the idea that this isn't it, that life begins after something changes, that peace is a result of arriving somewhere new. Peace is the result of stopping, of no longer needing anything else to make the now okay. And when you stop needing something else, you start noticing what's already here. The way your breath softens when you release judgment. The way the light hits the wall when you're not rushing past it. The tiny moments of relief that have been there all along, waiting for you to show up. The craving to be elsewhere is not your fault. It's a deeply conditioned pattern, taught by a world that profits off your dissatisfaction. But you can unlearn it by slowing down, by saying yes to the now, even if it's incomplete, especially then, You're not trapped. You're being invited to stop abandoning yourself in search of a better self. Because the version of you that's listening to this, they're not broken. They don't need to be upgraded. They just need to be trusted. This moment doesn't need to be escaped. It needs to be met. And when you do, when you fully drop into this breath, this feeling, this place, you realize something quiet but life-changing. There was never anywhere else to be. You've always been here. Life has always been here. And now, finally, you are too. And then, when you've finally stopped reaching for the next thing, another feeling rises. Stillness. But not the peaceful kind. The kind that feels like waiting. The kind that feels like life is stalled. Where nothing is moving fast enough or not moving at all. You've done the work. You've let go of craving. You've stopped trying to escape the now. But what do you do when the now feels empty? When your efforts don't bloom? When silence stretches longer than you thought you could bear? This is where many people lose trust. In themselves, in life, in the process. They confuse delay with failure and stillness with punishment. But Buddhist wisdom reveals something else. Something quietly revolutionary. That waiting is not a waste. That delay is not life going wrong. It is life teaching you how to see. There is no such thing as being off time. Only being out of sync with your understanding of time. Because what if delays are not blocks, but bridges? What if what feels like a pause is really preparation? Delays test the parts of us that still depend on speed for validation, the parts that only feel alive when something is happening, when there's motion, recognition, feedback. But growth doesn't always feel like momentum. Sometimes it feels like quiet, like no sign, no answer, no applause. And yet, beneath the surface, something is rearranging. Roots are growing, foundations are forming, things are being cleared that you can't yet see. In Buddhism, life is seen not as a race, but a path. A journey that reveals itself moment by moment, not mile by mile. Setbacks are not detours, they're deeper invitations to listen, to soften, to stop demanding a finish line and start trusting the walk. The Dharma, meaning truth, or the deeper teachings of life, often hides itself inside delays. Why? Because it's the only place we slow down enough to hear it. When things move quickly, the ego takes credit. When things stall, the ego starts to panic. And in that panic, all of your unexamined beliefs rise to the surface. That's the real curriculum. That's where the learning begins. The pause is not passive. It's a process of uncovering. When you're forced to sit in the space between what was and what's next, you start to meet yourself more honestly. You see the grasping that was still there, the expectations still clinging to outcome, the fear that was hiding behind certainty. None of that could be revealed while things were moving forward. Only stillness brings that clarity. We're taught that success looks like constant motion, but in Buddhist practice, motion without awareness is just another form of ignorance. What matters isn't whether things are happening. What matters is whether you're present with what is happening, even when that's nothing at all. That's why delays aren't delays. They're medicine, bitter at first, but healing over time. If you've been feeling like life is making you wait for clarity, for progress, for the next step, ask yourself this: what would change if this pause was intelligent? What if it was designed to realign you, not discourage you? Not everything blooms the moment it's planted. Not every answer is ready when the question first arises. Some clarity takes time. Some healing waits until you're truly ready to receive it. There's a natural rhythm to insight, a sacred timing to transformation. It can't be forced. It doesn't arrive on your schedule. It arrives when your system, your nervous system, your spiritual system, is ready to hold it without collapsing. That readiness can't be skipped. It's built inside the delay. Delays strip you of your illusion of control. They take the map from your hands and say, "Now feel your way forward." And that's terrifying, until it isn't. Because feeling your way builds a different kind of strength. The strength to be present without needing answers. The strength to keep your heart open without seeing results. The strength to trust life, not because it's predictable, but because it's alive and aware and always offering you exactly what you need, even when that offering is stillness. Waiting is a mirror. It shows you what you really believe about worth, about timing, about what makes you valuable. If your worth is tied to productivity, delays will feel like death. But if your worth is rooted in being, then delays become sacred ground, a place where nothing is expected of you but presence. We say we want peace, but peace doesn't arrive wrapped in excitement. It arrives in the quiet moments that ask nothing of you, in the hours that feel unimportant, in the space between plans. And it's in those exact spaces that the deepest realignments take place. Think about the last time your life paused, really paused. Maybe it looked like burnout, or heartbreak, or everything falling apart at once. And you thought, I can't move forward. But what you didn't see, what none of us see right away, is that something else was moving. Your awareness, your maturity, your clarity, the part of you that finally saw what couldn't be unseen. That's the power of stillness. It's not loud. It doesn't come with fanfare, but it changes you. It purifies the noise. It gives you back to yourself. There's a teaching in Buddhism called patience paramita. It means perfect patience, not the kind that grits its teeth and waits for life to cooperate, but the kind that leans into the moment with curiosity, that trusts each delay as a necessary part of the unfolding, that lets go of the demand for when and simply says, I'm here. This patience is not passivity. It's a fierce softness, a strength that holds still without collapsing, a wisdom that knows the sun will rise again, because it always does. You don't need to force the dawn. You only need to be present for it when it comes. So much of our suffering comes from the timeline we invented. By now I should be. This shouldn't be taking so long. But what if the timeline was never yours to create? What if life was unfolding exactly as it should, and your only job is to stay awake inside it? Delays become unbearable when we make them mean something personal, that we're failing, that we're being punished. But what if they mean the opposite? That life is protecting you from something you're not ready for, that the universe is giving you time to shed a layer of false identity before your next chapter begins, that it's not denying you, it's dignifying you by preparing you properly. And yes, preparation often looks like stillness, like being stripped of distractions, like waiting longer than your mind thinks is fair. But it's inside that waiting that you begin to see the stories you've been carrying. The ones that say, if I'm not moving, I'm worthless. If I'm not achieving, I'm failing. If I don't know what's next, I'm lost. These stories can't survive the silence. That's why silence is necessary. Not as a punishment, but as a clearing. So that when you finally step into what's next, you're not carrying the old noise with you. Even nature understands this. The trees don't bloom year-round. The earth has seasons, and yet we expect ourselves to be in constant harvest, to always be producing, showing, doing, becoming. But the deepest growth happens underground, in the dark, where roots expand unseen. That's what delays give you, not progress that's visible, but power that's invisible, until the moment it's not. And when that moment comes, and it always comes, you'll see why you had to wait, why the pause was necessary, why you couldn't force the next step, no matter how ready you thought you were. Because readiness is not a thought, it's a frequency, and you tune to it not through control, but through surrender. So let the delay be what it is. Don't fight it. Don't frame it as failure. Don't let the world's obsession with speed make you ashamed of stillness. You are not behind. You are not being punished. You are being positioned right here, right now, in this sacred in-between. This is the part of the story where nothing happens and everything changes. So rest, breathe, trust. The stillness is not empty. It's full of everything you're about to become. The stillness didn't last forever, but something changed inside it. A quiet shift, the kind that doesn't come from answers, but from finally dropping the demand for them. And just when you start to settle into presence, the mind whispers again, "What's next?" That subtle restlessness returns, not loud this time, but wrapped in questions that sound like logic. What if this isn't enough? What if the real happiness is still out there? This is where the illusion returns, not in chaos, but in hope. A hope that says joy will arrive when the next phase of life finally begins. That the next milestone, the next transformation, the next version of you will be the one that finally feels like peace. And yet, with every next that arrives, another one appears on the horizon. In Buddhist teachings, this endless cycle is called samsara. Not a place, but a pattern. A loop of seeking, gaining, losing, and starting over. It's driven by a belief that something better lies ahead. But progress in samsara is a trick. It keeps you chasing. It convinces you that fulfillment is always close, but never quite here. The world rewards this illusion. You're praised for ambition, for the grind, for chasing the next goal. And because the culture worships progress, it's easy to believe that movement is meaning. But there's a cost to this chase that nobody warns you about. It's subtle. You feel it in the silence after achievement, in the emptiness that follows the big moment, in the quiet question that won't go away. Is this all there is? The chase never satisfies because the thing you're really looking for isn't out there. It's not hidden in the next promotion or relationship or spiritual insight. It's buried underneath the belief that you need to be someone else, somewhere else, living something else. Samsara is fueled by becoming. The endless drive to improve, evolve, perfect, achieve. On the surface, it looks like growth. Underneath, it's often fear wearing a clever mask. Fear that if you stop pushing forward, you'll be stuck forever. Fear that if you pause, you'll fall behind. But what if behind and ahead are both illusions? What if presence is the only real place anything ever happens? The illusion of progress is powerful because it mimics purpose. It gives the ego something to attach to. A story, a timeline, a ladder, and every time you reach one rung, the next one feels just out of reach. So you keep climbing, unaware that the ladder itself is anchored in suffering. True growth doesn't come from reaching the next step. It comes from seeing the mechanism that keeps you stepping, from watching your mind reach, grasp, strive, and realizing you don't have to follow it anymore. The Buddha didn't teach enlightenment as something far away. He taught it as a shift in perception. The end of suffering doesn't arrive when your circumstances finally align. It arrives when the mind stops believing that circumstances are the key to peace. There's nothing wrong with goals, but when goals become the substitute for presence, you get trapped. When they become your identity, your compass, your definition of success, you start postponing your life. Telling yourself you'll rest after the next win. You'll love yourself after the next change. You'll be happy after the next phase, but after never arrives. The illusion of progress is that you're getting closer. The reality is that you're getting further from the moment, from the simplicity of now, from the stillness where peace actually lives. There's a term in Buddhist psychology called bhavatanha, the craving to become. It's not just desire, it's obsession with a different self. A version of you that's better, happier, more enlightened. This craving is subtle, but exhausting. It turns spiritual practice into self-improvement. It turns rest into guilt. It turns peace into something to earn. And when you believe peace must be earned, you never feel worthy of it. This craving shows up in quiet ways, in the pressure to always be productive, in the inability to sit still without checking your phone, in the habit of measuring your worth by your progress. It's not loud, but it's constant, and it keeps your nervous system in a state of waiting to feel like enough. What happens when you stop? Not just physically, but mentally. When you drop the story that life is a staircase and you're not at the top yet. Often, discomfort arises. Boredom, doubt, anxiety. These are the emotions samsara hides, the ones that surface only when you exit the loop. That's why so many people keep moving. They're afraid of what they'll feel if they don't. But those feelings are the doorway, not the obstacle. Because behind them is presence, not a glamorous spiritual high, a simple, grounded stillness, the kind that doesn't need to achieve, the kind that knows, I don't need to be further to be whole. This is not an argument against progress. It's an invitation to see it clearly, to stop mistaking movement for meaning, to stop confusing stimulation with purpose, because true purpose doesn't push, it pulls, it doesn't pressure, it aligns. Progress is real when it arises from clarity, when it's rooted in presence, when it's not driven by fear or comparison. But when it comes from the illusion that life gets better only when it changes, you're trapped. Even when everything looks perfect from the outside, you've probably known people who have made it. And yet, something in their eyes still looks tired. still restless, still searching. That's the trap. Samsara doesn't care how much you accomplish. It only needs you to believe that more will fix it. And that belief, it's the fuel for endless dissatisfaction. You break that cycle not by giving up, but by waking up. By seeing the pattern as it's happening. By noticing the moment you start planning your happiness instead of experiencing it. Happiness doesn't live in the next phase. It lives in the letting go of needing the next phase. It's not an event. It's a relaxation of resistance, a softening into what is, a release of the idea that you need to become someone new to feel okay. This is the hard truth. If you can't feel peace now, you won't feel it then, because the part of you that keeps reaching will come with you. It always does. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like pausing when the urge to chase returns. It looks like questioning whether the goal is rooted in alignment or avoidance. It looks like saying yes to this moment before demanding the next. It's letting go of the idea that your value depends on progress, that your worth is something to improve, that the next step is more holy than the ground you're standing on now. This is not laziness, it's wisdom. The wisdom to know that stillness is not a step back, it's a step inward, into the part of you that's already complete. You can still move, you can still grow. But now you're not growing because you're unworthy, you're growing because you're alive. And life naturally unfolds when it's not being forced. The illusion of progress is hard to leave behind. It's addictive. It gives you a false sense of control. But control is not the path. Clarity is. And clarity comes when the mind finally stops racing forward and sees the moment it's in, clearly, gently, without judgment. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed to, not in another lifetime, not in another identity, but right here, in the seeing, in the ending of the chase, not by arriving somewhere new, but by realizing you never had to leave. So the cycle starts to crack. The pattern loses power. You begin to see that reaching for the next thing was never the way out. It was the trap itself. Peace wasn't in the upgrade, it was in the release. But then something smaller happens. You drop your keys, someone cuts in line, the power goes out in the middle of your flow, and suddenly all that clarity evaporates. You're annoyed, irritated. The mind flares up again, not because life is unbearable, but because it didn't go as planned. And here lies the next turning point, not in the big life transitions, but in the tiny disruptions, the ones that feel too small to matter, but carry an ancient truth, the ones that reveal where the spiritual path actually happens, not on retreats, not in books, but in the middle of daily life when something inconvenient happens and you get to choose how you meet it. Inconvenience is one of life's sharpest teachers, not because it's cruel, but because it's consistent. It appears when you're trying to control. It arrives when the day is scheduled too tightly, when your identity is built on being efficient, competent, or calm, and in a single moment that identity is challenged. The email doesn't send, the traffic doesn't move, the internet crashes, someone misunderstands you, nothing dramatic, just enough to stir something. In Buddhist practice, that stirring is sacred. It's the moment you get to see yourself. The reaction that flares up is a mirror, showing you the parts still governed by impatience, pride, or a need for control. And here's the catch. Those parts don't reveal themselves when everything is smooth. They hide well. It takes a little friction to bring them out into the light. Inconvenience doesn't cause your suffering. It reveals it. The discomfort was already there, tucked beneath the surface. The disruption simply gave it a shape, a form you could notice, question, and eventually understand. The mind wants to bypass small annoyances. It sees them as obstacles. But the wisdom tradition doesn't see obstacles. It sees invitations. Every delay, every interruption, every plan that doesn't go your way, it's not just life being difficult, it's life being exact, giving you the perfect conditions to meet your edge, and beyond that edge, freedom. If a moment of frustration feels too intense for its cause, that's not random. That intensity is the residue of past habits, old patterns, the stories you've been telling yourself about how things should be. Buddhism calls these sankharas, conditioned tendencies. They don't disappear because you read a quote. They dissolve when they're seen clearly in real time. And real time is messy. Real time is when your phone dies during an important call and you feel your chest tighten, not because it matters that much, but because something deeper is being touched. That's the curriculum. You can't heal what you haven't faced, and inconvenience is one of the purest mirrors of what's still unhealed. It's not punishing you. It's pointing to the tension, to the expectation, to the belief that life owes you a smooth ride if you've done everything right. That belief is where suffering hides. Disruptions are honest. They don't care about your plans. They don't flatter your identity. They show up raw and unfiltered. And that's why they're so powerful. Because they break the illusion of control. They remind you, gently or not, that reality doesn't bend to your will. It unfolds on its own timeline. Your peace isn't in mastering that timeline. It's in releasing the fight against it. The ego builds itself around expectations. It likes to know what comes next. It likes a sense of progress. But life refuses to be predictable. It surprises. It interrupts. It gets in the way. And every time it does, the ego reacts, tightens, resists, judges. But you are not the ego. You are the awareness that notices the reaction. And that awareness is where freedom begins. The next time you're late, or misunderstood, or held up by something small, feel the reaction without following it. Stay with it, not to suppress it, but to study it. Where is the heat in your body? What story is the mind telling? What unmet expectation is being exposed? That investigation is not passive, it's transformative. It's not about liking the inconvenience, it's about using it as a doorway, as a reminder, as a pause in the momentum of habit. Because in that pause, everything can shift. You might find that beneath the irritation is fear. Fear of wasting time, fear of being judged, fear of losing control. And beneath the fear, a more vulnerable truth. You've built your peace on things going right. But peace built on control will always be fragile. Inconvenience gives you the chance to build peace on something stronger, presence, the kind that doesn't require the world to behave a certain way, the kind that says, even this can be enough, even this can be met with grace. This is not about pretending nothing bothers you. It's about realizing that what bothers you is often the exact thing that wakes you up. That reminds you, you are not your schedule. You are not your mood. You are not your delay. You are the space in which all of it unfolds. This practice is simple, but not easy. It asks you to see the sacred in the mundane, to treat spilled coffee as a moment to return to breath, to treat traffic as a meditation bell, to treat a long line as a chance to soften the shoulders, feel the ground, and drop the inner commentary. Daily life becomes your teacher when you stop demanding that it feel like a lesson. No need for a retreat, no need for a perfect setup. The teaching is already happening in your home, in your inbox, in your relationships. Right where the inconvenience arises, so does the mirror. And if you're willing to look into it without flinching, you'll start to see something different. Not a life full of problems, but a life full of teachings. Even in the most basic moments, you lose your keys and you find your impatience. Someone interrupts and you notice your craving for respect. The internet cuts out and you feel the grip of wanting things to go your way. These are not errors. They are access points. They reveal what no amount of reading or thinking can reveal. Because theory doesn't liberate, experience does, and experience is messy. It's full of surprises. But if you stay open, even the most inconvenient moments become your path. You start to see that nothing needs to be removed for growth to happen, only met, only noticed, only held with a little more space. That space is the real practice, not fixing, not analyzing, just staying, letting the discomfort rise and fall, letting the world do what it does while you remain grounded, not because it's easy, but because you've stopped resisting. Buddhism doesn't ask you to enjoy inconvenience. It asks you to stop wasting it, because every moment of disruption holds a question. Will you react, or will you awaken? The reaction is fast, unconscious, familiar. Awakening is slower. It takes curiosity. It takes humility. It takes the willingness to feel the heat without adding more fire. And that shift, that small pause between stimulus and response, is where freedom begins. This path is not glamorous. It doesn't always feel profound, but it's real, and it's available every day, in the interruptions, in the ordinary, in the places no one else sees. You don't need more time to grow. You need to see that growth is already happening, right now, in the middle of what you wish wasn't happening. And when you start to see life that way, something quiet and profound occurs. The little things stop stealing your peace because they stop surprising you. You start expecting the unexpected, and instead of flinching, you soften. You meet life not with tension, but with tenderness. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. The teaching was never hidden. It was just waiting, inside the delays, inside the noise, inside the mess. And now that you've slowed down enough to notice, you begin to hear it. Clearer than before, right here in the middle of the most inconvenient moment, the lesson is already unfolding. You've spent so long trying to stay calm, trying to stay composed when life interrupts you, derails your plans, presses on your nerves in ways that feel personal. And maybe now you've learned to pause, to soften, to respond rather than react. But what happens when the disruption isn't outside anymore, when it's inside? When the restlessness, the sadness, the anxiety, the heaviness doesn't pass? What happens when you wake up with a weight in your chest, no external cause in sight, and nothing feels wrong except the way you feel. This is where many people turn away. They distract, suppress, or shame themselves for not being okay. But in Buddhist wisdom, this is where the real work begins. Not by fixing the feeling, but by meeting it fully. Because every emotional state, yes, even the messy, uncomfortable ones, is not a failure. It's a gate, a direct doorway into understanding what your mind has kept hidden, what your body has tried to carry silently. No emotion is random. Each one carries a message, not always with words, but always with precision. Anxiety may not be telling you to panic. It might be pointing to the part of you that's still trying to control what can't be controlled. Boredom isn't a sign of laziness. It might be a signal that your attention is being pulled away from something deeper, something you've been afraid to face. The mind often treats emotion as a problem, something to manage, get past, fix. But from a Buddhist view, emotion is part of the path itself, not a detour, not a disruption, but the very material of awakening. Feelings arise not because you're doing life wrong, but because life is showing you what's alive inside you, and only what is felt can be freed. Trying to escape your current emotion is like trying to leave your own shadow behind. You can't outrun it. You can't outthink it. You can only turn toward it. Stay, breathe, feel what it's asking for, not intellectually, but somatically. The body always knows what the mind forgets. That presence is what dissolves intensity, not suppression. You're not failing when you feel too much. You're being given the chance to feel with more wisdom. And wisdom doesn't mean detachment. It means intimacy. It means knowing the terrain of your inner world so well that fear loses its grip. It means knowing that anger is sometimes grief in disguise, that loneliness is not a flaw, but a longing for connection with yourself. That confusion isn't the absence of clarity, it's the breakdown of old narratives that no longer fit. Your current emotional state may not feel welcome, but it has a purpose. It's bringing to the surface the exact frequency that needs to be seen and heard, and no one else can decode it for you. No book, no teacher, no quote can replace your direct experience of what's moving through you. We are conditioned to want peace without disruption, joy without sadness, love without loss. But true peace is not sterile. It includes all of it. It makes room. It doesn't push the feeling away. It widens the space around it. In Buddhist practice, this space is called vipassana, clear seeing. It's the ability to observe without judgment, to witness your own mind and heart as they unfold, not to fix them, but to understand them. The practice is not to stop feeling, but to stop being controlled by the feeling. And that shift begins when you stop identifying with the emotion. You are not the anger. You are not the shame. You are not the fear. You are the space that holds it all. There is a teaching in the Satipatthana Sutta, one of the foundational texts of Buddhist mindfulness, that says, "When a feeling arises, know that a feeling has arisen. When it fades, know that it fades." This is not detachment. This is deep presence. You're not getting lost in the waves. You're becoming the ocean that sees them rise and fall. And when you practice this kind of awareness, something begins to shift. Emotions no longer hijack your day. They become signals, invitations, teachers, Anxiety shows you where the mind is looping around uncertainty. Sadness reveals where your heart still carries unmet tenderness. Anger points to the boundary that was ignored or crossed. Even numbness has wisdom. It shows that part of you is overwhelmed and needs gentleness, not discipline. You don't need to label every emotion. You don't need to explain it to yourself. You only need to stay with it long enough for it to express what words never could. Emotion is not an enemy to be conquered. It is a guide to be honored. There's a myth that emotional mastery means not feeling anything deeply, but the truth is the opposite. Mastery means feeling everything without drowning, staying steady even in the flood, not by force, but by presence. You might not trust your emotions because you've been taught that they make you weak. But vulnerability is not weakness. It's contact. It's truth. And the more honest you are with what you feel, the less power those feelings have to control you in unconscious ways. Even the most difficult emotions, jealousy, bitterness, shame, hold something sacred. They reflect parts of you that were never allowed to speak, parts that were judged too harshly, too quickly. And now they're knocking again, not to ruin you, to return you, to bring you back to wholeness. So when emotion rises, stop asking what's wrong. Ask what's being revealed. Stop trying to make it go away. Ask what it's trying to teach you. Stop using spiritual language to bypass your pain. Use your presence to fully feel it. Feeling is not indulgence. It is release. It is the pathway to clarity, a clarity that cannot be faked, cannot be borrowed, cannot be outsourced. And sometimes the emotion won't move, not right away. That doesn't mean you're stuck. It means the lesson is still unfolding. It means there's more to see, more to meet, more to hold. Stay with it. And if staying is too much, sit near it. Breathe beside it. Let the feeling know you're not abandoning it this time. That presence doesn't mean solving. It means staying. Every time you meet emotion this way, something softens. A little tension unravels. A little space returns. And slowly you begin to trust that no emotion can truly break you. That every one of them is passing. That every wave, no matter how strong, eventually meets the shore. This doesn't mean life won't still bring intensity. It will, but now you meet it differently. You don't collapse, you don't panic, you don't run, you listen, you hold, you breathe. And that, more than any philosophy, is what changes you. Because in the end, emotions aren't obstacles. They're the material of awakening, the raw, honest, sacred mess of being human. And once you stop running from how you feel, you begin to remember something you've always known deep down. You were never too much. You were never broken for feeling deeply. You were never meant to be numb. You were meant to feel it all, and to find wisdom in the very place you were told to avoid. You've been taught to move through your emotions, to allow them, to learn from them. And now something deeper begins to stir, a realization that by meeting your own inner world with honesty, without rushing to escape or fix, you're not just healing yourself, you're changing how you show up for everyone else. And this is where the paradox begins. What if the most profound service you can offer to the world doesn't come from doing more, but from being more still? It's a quiet truth, one that most overlook. That in a culture obsessed with action, solving, rescuing, fixing. The most radical thing you can do might be to stay exactly where you are and hold your presence like a flame in the dark. Not to shine the light on others, but to remind them they have one too. The Bodhisattva path in Buddhism is the path of compassion. It's the vow to awaken not only for yourself, but for the benefit of all beings. But that vow doesn't always play out in dramatic acts of heroism. Sometimes it manifests in invisible ways, sitting with your pain instead of projecting it, not reacting when it would be easier to lash out, holding space for someone else's storm, not because you have the answers, but because you're anchored enough not to be swept away. This is the paradox, that your stillness is not inactivity. It's deep, silent offering. Because in a world spinning with noise, anxiety, and overstimulation, to be calm is to be a refuge. To be grounded is to be a doorway. People don't need you to fix their lives. They need to feel something stable, something unshaken, something true. And that something is you when you stop rushing to be anywhere else. Staying where you are, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, is the work. It's not passive, it's powerful, because it interrupts the momentum of panic that so many live in. When you choose stillness, you interrupt that cycle. You say, it's okay not to know, it's okay not to move, it's okay to be right here, and others feel it. Even if they can't name it, they feel your steadiness, your breath, your choice not to escape. And in that, they find a kind of permission. Not because you told them what to do, but because you modeled what presence looks like. Presence that doesn't need to perform. Presence that listens without trying to fix. Presence that can sit beside pain without turning away. The Bodhisattva doesn't withdraw from the world, but neither do they race to fix it from ego. They serve by becoming so still, so clear, that their very being becomes an invitation to slow down, to feel, to soften, to return. You don't need a perfect life to be that kind of presence. You don't need to have healed everything. You just need to be willing to stay with what is, not because you're trying to help, but because you're not trying to escape. Sometimes the greatest compassion isn't what you do for others, but how you meet yourself when no one is watching. Because that quiet self-meeting ripples outward. It shapes how you speak, how you listen, how you breathe in rooms filled with tension. It affects how others feel around you, not because you fixed their world, but because you weren't afraid of your own. Stillness doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean withdrawal. It means resting in a place within that is undisturbed by the chaos of reaction. It means responding from depth, not reflex. It means letting people have their experience without making it about you. That level of presence is rare, and because it's rare, it's precious. You might wonder how staying still can help the world when there's so much suffering. So much that needs action, change, effort. But action that comes from unhealed pain often creates more of it. And trying to save others before you've sat with your own sorrow tends to spread confusion, not clarity. True compassion isn't noisy, it's spacious. It doesn't rush, it doesn't demand results. It meets people where they are, not with solutions, but with presence. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means your care becomes rooted, not scattered, not frantic, but deliberate, grounded, sustainable. Stillness is what makes your compassion strong enough to endure, not just in crisis, but in the long, quiet moments afterward. When people don't just need your help, they need your steadiness. There's a reason why meditation is considered a form of service in many Buddhist traditions. Sitting in stillness is not self-centered. It's a collective offering. Because in that stillness, you're not just calming your own nervous system. You're generating clarity. You're clearing emotional static that might otherwise be passed on. You're choosing not to react, not to perpetuate old patterns. That choice, made again and again, shifts something in the field around you. Being still is not about inaction. It's about aligned action. Moving from a place of presence, not pressure. Serving from depth, not desperation. When you do this, your smallest actions begin to carry weight. A glance, a breath, a word spoken without urgency. These things create safety, and safety allows transformation. Not everyone will understand this path. Some will mistake your quiet for detachment, your lack of urgency for indifference. But you'll know what it takes to stay, to sit with discomfort without numbing, to witness suffering without collapsing, to respond with clarity, not reactivity, and slowly the world around you begins to feel it too. Stillness doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you stop being ruled by what you feel. You begin to sense the pain of others, not as something to run from or rush to fix, but as something you can sit beside, without judgment. That sitting, that witnessing, that steady presence, that is service. And it's not always quiet. Sometimes stillness gives rise to fierce compassion, to action born from clarity, to movements that are so rooted in love they don't burn you out, they energize you. They don't come from fear, they come from alignment. This is the paradox, that the deeper your stillness, the more powerful your impact, not by force, but by resonance. The stiller you become, the more people remember their own capacity to slow down, to feel, to awaken. You're not waiting for enlightenment to serve. You're serving through the very path that brings you there. By not abandoning your own inner world, you model what it means to stay with life, all of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. There's nothing passive about this. It's the hardest thing most people will ever do, to stay when they want to run, to feel instead of fix, to offer presence when performance would be easier. But in that offering, something shifts. In you, in them, in the space between. Because when one person learns to hold steady, they become a reference point for others, not a guru, not a savior, just a human being who learned how to stay. And that kind of presence? It's what the world is aching for. So, stay. Serve from stillness. Let your life be the ground others remember how to land on. Let your presence be the mirror in which others see themselves more clearly. Not by leaving the world behind, but by staying fully with it, right where you are. The stillness taught you how to stay, not to fix, not to escape, but to become a steady presence in a world that trembles easily. You've seen that stillness itself can serve. That compassion doesn't always shout. It listens, it waits, it breathes with others. But now, something else begins to emerge. A question that lingers after all the silence. What if your greatest teacher isn't within you, but around you? What if the things you resist, the noise, the strangers, the broken routines, have been guiding you all along? This is where Buddhist wisdom shifts the lens once again. The next realization doesn't come from sitting deeper or reading more. It comes from paying attention. Because the most profound teachings don't always come from scriptures or retreats. They come from your life, from the exact conditions you wake up to every day. Your environment, whether calm or chaotic, nurturing or tense, is not just background noise. It's instruction, constantly shaping you, constantly revealing where your resistance still lives. You don't need to be in a monastery to awaken. You only need to notice that your surroundings are already holding the curriculum, the people you meet, the patterns you fall into, the traffic that grinds your patience, the weather that ruins your plans. All of it is teaching. The lesson isn't always spoken, but it's always there, waiting to be seen. The person who interrupts you mid-sentence may be teaching you where your need to be heard still grips too tightly. The child who asks too many questions may be showing you where wonder has been replaced by rigidity. Even the noisy neighbor or the slow line at the grocery store can be a doorway to awareness if you're willing to stop labeling them as distractions and start recognizing them as reflections. In Buddhist tradition, there's a reason monks sweep the same floor every day or offer food with precise care. It's not the task, it's the presence inside the task. The humility to meet each moment as sacred, no matter how plain it appears. That mindset isn't limited to temples. It's available at your kitchen sink, at a red light, in the middle of a crowded store. The question isn't where you are. The question is, are you paying attention? The world doesn't just test you, it shows you. Your reaction to what's around you reveals what's within you. If you always feel rushed, look at how you relate to time. If others always seem difficult, look at what part of yourself hasn't been given enough compassion. If your surroundings feel dull, maybe it's not the environment, it's the absence of attention. Life reflects, not to blame, but to awaken. We often wait for the right moment to be present, but the right moment is the one already happening. The cracked sidewalk, the dripping faucet, the stranger's face. Every detail, no matter how mundane, can pull you back into reality. That return, that sudden shift into noticing, is where the path deepens. Your environment also exposes the habits you've normalized, the screens you can't stop checking, the clutter you've stopped seeing, the tension in your shoulders you no longer question. All of it speaks. And when you start to listen, you realize you're always in a temple. The walls just look different. Stillness taught you to stay, but your environment teaches you how to see. Not with judgment, but with awareness. And once you see, you begin to soften, because you understand that every moment has a teacher hidden in it. Not because the world is perfect, but because it's precise. Even the people who trigger you are offering something sacred, not their behavior, but your reaction to it. That flash of anger, that defensiveness, that need to explain yourself, these aren't flaws, they're openings. They show you where you're still grasping, still needing control, still building identity on sand. This doesn't mean you have to love every situation, but what if you respected it? What if every person you met carried a lesson, whether gentle or sharp? And what if those lessons weren't punishments, but permissions to grow, to shift, to drop what no longer fits? Your environment is the mirror that never blinks. It shows you what you project, what you avoid, what you elevate or ignore. And it doesn't wait for your permission. It teaches regardless of your mood, your beliefs, your preferences. That's the kind of teacher the world is. Honest, untamed, constant. And the teachings change as you do. What once triggered you now softens you. What once annoyed you now reminds you to breathe. The same place that once felt empty begins to feel full. Not because it changed, but because you did. You start to notice the tone of your voice in conversations, the way you move through your space, the energy you bring into a room, the tension you carry into silence. These are all feedback loops. The environment responds to your inner state, and your inner state is shaped by the environment. This is not separation, it's interdependence. Buddhism calls this pratitya samutpada, dependent origination. Nothing arises alone. Everything arises in relationship. So, if peace is missing, the path isn't to withdraw. It's to engage, gently, curiously, with eyes open to what's already in front of you. And not just people or objects. Even the atmosphere teaches. The heaviness in a room after an argument. The ease that enters with a smile. The tension that rises during uncertainty. These aren't accidents. They're signals. They show you how deeply connected everything is. That your presence matters not because you're perfect, but because you're aware. Sometimes your environment pushes back, not because it's against you, but because it's trying to wake up the part of you that still thinks you're separate. The part that forgets how your words shape energy, how your mood affects the room, how your silence can heal or harm, depending on the awareness behind it. You're not just living in a world, you're participating in it, shaping it, being shaped by it, every day. And the more you realize this, the less you wait for ideal conditions. You stop saying, once things calm down, I'll be more mindful. You see that this moment, messy as it is enough. Because this moment carries truth. And truth, however inconvenient, is what brings liberation. The challenge is to stay open, to meet every piece of your environment with presence, not preference, to treat the traffic as tenderly as the sunset, to let the loud moments be as sacred as the quiet ones. No, it won't always feel spiritual, it won't always feel profound, but that's the teaching too. The lesson that presence is not a feeling, it's a choice, over and over again, to come back, to see what's in front of you, to soften when it's easier to shut down, to breathe even when the noise is loud. This is not idealism, it's practical awakening. It's the practice of seeing every environment, every interaction, every detail as the exact ground where awareness is built. And when that awareness deepens, everything starts to speak. The ordinary becomes radiant, the overlooked becomes holy, and life itself becomes your guru. Not by changing form, but by being seen fully for the first time. Once you start seeing everything around you as part of the teaching, each conversation, delay, sound, and space, you begin to notice something even more humbling. That nothing ever really happens outside the path. Not a single moment is wasted. Even the parts of your life that felt like failures or accidents, especially those, were not detours. They were chapters of the same story. But the mind rarely sees it that way. It clings to the idea of wrong turns, missed chances, time lost. It obsesses over whether you've wasted too much, drifted too far, or waited too long. And yet, from the Buddhist view, that entire fear is based on a myth. There is no such thing as being off-path. This idea is one of the deepest and most liberating truths in Buddhist thought. That the very things you thought disqualified you from the journey, your regrets, your confusion, your mistakes, are not disqualifications at all. They are the journey. They're woven into the process of waking up, not separate from it. What looked like failure from one angle becomes insight from another. What felt like a collapse becomes the beginning of deeper integrity. The events don't change, but your relationship to them does. And in that shift, everything begins to open. The illusion of being off-path is rooted in comparison. It thrives in judgment. It whispers that others are further, more evolved, more aligned, and that you are behind. But the Dharma doesn't use timelines. It doesn't measure progress in years or accomplishments. It works in presence, in depth, in honesty. And sometimes those qualities are born not from success, but from hardship. Some of the most profound teachings come not through spiritual highs, but through moments you never asked for. Illness, heartbreak, loss, isolation. These moments don't feel sacred, but they have a way of stripping you down to what's real. And in that space, bare, shaken, quiet, you start to see life differently. Not because you found a new philosophy, but because the old one no longer fits. Buddhism teaches that awakening can happen at any point along the road, not just when things are clear, but especially when they are not. And the truth is, clarity often arises after the confusion. Insight blooms after the unraveling. You don't become wise by avoiding mistakes. You become wise by staying present with them, learning from them, allowing them to soften you. When you think you've fallen off the path, what you've really done is stepped into a deeper layer of it. One that asks not for performance, but for honesty. One that doesn't care if you're enlightened or messy or tired. It just wants your full attention. Mistakes are not interruptions. They're mirrors. They show you where your conditioning still lives, where your mind still believes in separation, where your heart still closes when things don't go to plan. That insight is gold, not the mistake itself, but what it reveals. And even regret, which can feel so heavy, so final, is part of the process too. Regret isn't proof of failure. It's a signal that you're waking up, that you're starting to see with more compassion, more clarity, more awareness. And that seeing is painful at first, but only because it shows you where you were disconnected. That pain is not punishment, it's the tension of growth. The mind likes clean stories, good choices and bad ones, right paths and wrong ones. But life doesn't move like that. It weaves, it loops, it circles back. And sometimes what you thought was a detour was actually the only way your heart could be opened. Sometimes what you called being lost was the only way your identity could dissolve. There is a Zen saying, "The obstacle is the path." Not because struggle is inherently good, but because it wakes you up. It shakes the mind loose from its assumptions. It humbles the ego. It shows you that you are not in control of timing. And it reminds you, gently or forcefully, that you are not broken. You are in process. Even confusion can be sacred, because confusion often marks the moment when an old belief is falling apart, but the new one hasn't fully formed yet. That space in between is fertile, not comfortable, but potent. It's where the roots of deeper understanding begin to grow. You might not see it in the moment. In fact, most of the time, you won't. The clarity comes later, when enough presence has been brought to the pain, when enough breath has been given to the silence, when enough time has passed for you to see that the thing you once judged as a mistake saved you, not from pain, but from shallowness, from sleepwalking, from becoming someone who avoids all discomfort at the cost of never truly living. Being off path is a story told by fear, a story that says you should have done it better, should have known more, should have gotten there faster. But there is no there. There is only here. And the minute you return to this moment, fully, without punishment, you're back. Not back in the way of undoing the past, back in the way of remembering. You never left. The teachings of the Buddha were not just for monks or sages. They were for everyone. For people in grief, in transition, in doubt. The path isn't for the perfect. It's for the honest, for the ones willing to look at their own suffering, not with shame, but with curiosity. And when you do that, when you meet your regrets with tenderness instead of resistance, something begins to shift. The weight lifts. The story changes. You stop seeing your life as a series of wrong turns and start seeing it as a journey of returning, again and again, not to the version of you that had it all figured out, but to the one that's awake enough to begin again. Over and over, life offers you that chance to see clearly, to start fresh, to recognize that nothing you've done can disqualify you from peace. It's not earned, it's remembered. And you remember it not by chasing a better version of yourself, but by turning gently toward the one that's here. Even the moments when you felt furthest from truth were filled with it. You just couldn't see it yet. That doesn't make them meaningless. That makes them human. And being human is not a problem to solve. It's a truth to embrace. So the next time your mind tells you that you've failed, pause, feel the breath, feel the ground, and ask, what if this is the path? What if this feeling, this mistake, this confusion is the doorway? Not the end, not the disqualification, but the beginning, again, in a deeper, quieter, more grounded way. This is how awakening happens, not by climbing a perfect ladder, but by sitting in the middle of your own life as it is, and choosing to meet it with presence, with compassion, with the wisdom that says, every step counts, every moment teaches, and every so-called detour was part of the path all along. So you've seen now that the path never really disappears. It bends, it darkens, it doubles back. But it never ends, not even when you feel furthest from it, especially not then. What once looked like a detour becomes part of the pattern. What once felt like a collapse becomes the foundation. But there's one more piece you're being asked to face now. Not the illusion of failure, not the noise of regret, but the pain itself. The rawness that doesn't explain itself. The ache that has no name. The suffering that sits quietly, refusing to go away. This is where many turn back. But Buddhism points straight into it. Because there's something hidden there. Not just a wound, but a shape, a design, a structure more precise than you think. Suffering is not chaos. It is a pattern, a language, a code of transformation written into the fabric of your experience. And when met with awareness, it becomes more than pain. It becomes revelation. Every hardship you've endured has formed a structure inside you, a geometry. It's not random, it's exact. And in that precision lives the blueprint of your awakening. Not one moment of difficulty has been wasted. Not one night of grief, not 1 hour of uncertainty. They weren't roadblocks. They were sculptors, shaping your nervous system, refining your awareness, softening the armor around your heart. It may not feel elegant in the moment, but suffering moves with intelligent force. It strips away what no longer serves, and it does so with a strange kind of grace. Not soft, not gentle, but real, honest, sacred. You don't need to like your suffering, but you are invited to see it, not just emotionally, but structurally. Where does it appear? What triggers it? What shape does it take in your body, in your thoughts? What stories get louder when it rises? These aren't rhetorical questions. They are entry points. Each one opens the door to a part of you that has been waiting, not to be fixed, but to be understood. And that's the key. Understanding, not escaping. In Buddhist thought, suffering is not a flaw. It's a signal, a precise one. And it never shows up without cause. The law of karma ensures that. Every feeling, every contraction, every despair has conditions that gave birth to it. And once you start to see those conditions clearly, the suffering begins to lose its power. But here's what's so often missed. Those conditions aren't just past actions. They're patterns of perception, habitual ways of relating to life. Suffering persists not only because something happened, but because the mind continues to resist it, cling to it, define itself by it. When the pain becomes identity, the suffering deepens. But when the pain is witnessed with space, with awareness, with presence, it begins to reveal its purpose. Sometimes pain arrives because something old is being asked to die. An illusion, a self-image, a belief you've outgrown, and the process of that death hurts, not because you did something wrong, but because shedding anything you've clung to always feels like grief. This is part of the sacred geometry, a collapsing structure that creates space for something more honest to rise. The shape of suffering is often circular. Patterns repeat, lessons return, the same fear, the same story, the same tension. But the circle isn't punishment, it's opportunity. Each time the pain comes back, you have the chance to meet it differently, to respond from a deeper place, to interrupt the cycle not by pushing it away, but by finally staying with it long enough to see what it contains. And it always contains something. A message, a truth, a shift. But you only access it by going in, not around. Some suffering builds pressure, slowly, quietly. The kind you carry in your body but never speak of. A tightness in the chest, a shallow breath, a subtle bracing against life. This kind doesn't explode, it erodes. It wears down your sense of safety over time. But even this kind carries form. Its shape is the exact outline of your neglect, not because you didn't care, but because you didn't know how to stay. You can learn now. You can relearn how to sit with discomfort and hear what it's actually saying, not the surface story, but the deeper one, the one that begins with, "I've been holding this for a long time," and I don't want to hide anymore. Other suffering comes like a strike, sudden, shattering. It doesn't give you time to prepare. It tears something away. A person, a certainty, a future you thought was yours. This suffering doesn't whisper, it roars, and in its wake you feel hollow, lost. But even here, the shape is precise. The pieces that broke reveal what mattered. They reveal what was never solid. They reveal where your identity had fused to things that were never permanent. Buddhism doesn't offer platitudes for this. It doesn't call it a blessing to make the pain easier. It simply says, see it, meet it, bow to it if you must, cry through it if you need to. But know that what feels like destruction is not meaningless. It's the rearranging of your inner architecture, so that the next time life shakes, you are less likely to collapse. There is also a form of suffering that arises from resistance to joy, a quieter, more hidden pattern. It's the pain of not letting yourself fully feel what is good, of numbing when kindness appears, of dismissing love, of expecting the rug to be pulled. This too has a geometry, one shaped by old betrayals, inherited fear, unmet grief. And it too must be seen clearly, because the heart cannot open fully if it fears its own joy. The most precise spiritual teachings are not written in text. They are etched into your life, and suffering is the ink. The pain you've lived through is not just memory, it's instruction. It taught you how to listen, how to slow down, how to become tender. If you let it, it will teach you how to forgive, how to see with compassion, how to stay soft in a world that teaches hardness. There's no need to rush through your pain. That urgency is itself part of the pattern. The belief that you'll only be okay once it's gone. But pain doesn't need to disappear to lose its grip. It only needs to be met without fear, without narrative, without the belief that it defines you. You are not broken because you hurt. You are not behind because you struggle. You are in the exact shape your path requires. The sacred geometry of suffering is not abstract. It is felt in your bones, in your breath, in the places you flinch without realizing, and slowly, with practice, you start to trace its outline. You begin to see the loops, the spirals, the angles that once cut you and now teach you. What was once sharp becomes a map, not out of pain, but through it. Not to escape, but to embody. Because awakening isn't about escaping the human experience. It's about being so present inside it that you begin to see the intelligence of every difficulty, every edge, every shatter. This is not theory. This is the kind of knowledge that sits in silence with you when you have nothing left to fix, when the grief doesn't need a reason, when the body remembers something the mind forgot. And even then, even in that quiet, you are still on the path. There are no wasted tears in this tradition, no meaningless ache. Every part of your pain has been shaped with care, not to harm you, but to return you, to yourself, to this breath, to this moment. So let the pain speak. Let it shape you, not into someone new, but into someone real. So much of what hurts isn't just the pain itself, it's the fight against it. The tension, the bracing, the story that says, this shouldn't be happening. That reflex is natural, it's ancient, but in the light of Buddhist wisdom, It's also what deepens the wound, because what we resist doesn't disappear. It expands, it pushes back, it holds its ground inside us until we break or soften. And in that moment of softening, when resistance drops, we don't just survive the pain, we transmute it. This is the power of non-resistance, the rare and radical act of accepting reality without conditions, not because we enjoy the discomfort, not because we agree with what's happening, but because we recognize the cost of denial, because fighting the moment never frees us from it. It only binds us tighter. Non-resistance is not weakness. It's not giving up. It's the opposite. It's a quiet, grounded strength that says, I will no longer waste energy rejecting what already is. That shift doesn't remove the pain, but it changes the texture of it. It becomes less sharp, less sticky, less personal. The suffering remains, but the suffering about the suffering begins to dissolve. This isn't just a mental trick, it's a full-bodied release. A surrender that begins in the nervous system, in the breath, in the clench of your jaw or the grip in your chest. When the body stops resisting, the mind starts to soften. And in that softening, reality reveals something different. It shows you that peace was never on the other side of fixing things. It was hidden beneath your refusal to let things be. There is deep intelligence in the Buddhist view of acceptance, not passive acceptance that allows harm or turns away from injustice, but a fierce, alert, compassionate acceptance that starts with presence, that says, before I change anything, I must see it clearly. Before I move forward, I must meet what's here. And when you meet what's here, fully, without resistance, you start to notice that the situation isn't always the real source of suffering. The inner war is, the refusal, the friction, the craving for something else. And when that craving releases, even just a little, you step into a kind of freedom that isn't dependent on your circumstances. It's deeper than external change. It's internal liberation. This is what makes non-resistance so transformative. It doesn't mean you never act, never protect yourself, never walk away. It simply means that your actions are no longer born from panic, from fear, from the desperate need to escape. They come from clarity, from peace, from a center that isn't shaken by discomfort. It's a strange thing. When you stop trying to change the pain often changes. Not because you forced it to, but because you allowed it to unfold, to breathe, to reveal what it had been carrying all along. That old memory, that unmet grief, that hidden fear. These things surface when we stop blocking them, and yes, it can be overwhelming at first, because the mind wants control, it wants order, and non-resistance asks you to let that go, to sit in the mess, to trust that even the chaos has a rhythm. But slowly, the chaos begins to settle. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you stop demanding that it be easy. You stop needing life to match your plan, and in that release, your vision clears. The mind opens, the heart softens, and reality, without your filter of rejection, starts to look different. Not perfect, but bearable, even beautiful in unexpected ways. Non-resistance turns pain into teacher, turns discomfort into mirror. It doesn't remove the hard parts, but it makes space around them. Space that allows breath, stillness, presence. Think of a hand clenching tightly around a stone. The tighter the grip, the more it hurts. The stone hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. When you open your hand, the stone may still be there. But now you're free. You're not trapped in the fight. You're resting in a deeper truth that you are not your pain. You are the awareness that holds it. This shift is subtle but profound, and it requires practice because resistance is sneaky. It disguises itself as strength, as protection, as motivation. But underneath, it's often fear. Fear of feeling, fear of not knowing, fear of breaking. And that fear needs compassion, not more judgment. When you meet resistance with gentleness, it begins to loosen. And what was once a wall becomes a doorway. This doorway is not theoretical, it's felt. When you stop pushing away sadness, you start hearing what it's trying to say. When you stop fighting anxiety, you start understanding what it's trying to protect. And when you stop resisting your own imperfection, you begin to remember your wholeness. That's what makes non-resistance a spiritual practice, not just a coping tool. It brings you face to face with the truth that life doesn't need to change for you to be free. You need to change your stance toward life, not by force, not overnight, but through the quiet decision to stop running, to sit, to breathe, to open, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because the moments when you feel most overwhelmed are often the exact moments when the old structures are breaking down, the old coping mechanisms, the old stories, and it's tempting to resist that breakdown, to grab onto something, anything. But if you can stay just long enough to see through the storm, what emerges on the other side is not weakness, it's clarity. The clarity of presence, the peace of surrender, the power of a mind that no longer fights its own experience. This is not easy, but it is possible, and it gets easier each time you practice. Each time you notice the grip of resistance and choose to soften instead. Each time you choose to breathe instead of brace. And slowly, the space within you begins to grow. That space is where transformation happens, where trauma begins to unwind, where love begins to flow again, where truth can finally be felt, not as a concept, but as a living reality. Non-resistance doesn't make the world softer. It makes you more able to meet it as it is. And paradoxically, that strength, the strength to stay with what is, becomes the ground for real change. Not frantic change, not forced change, but natural, organic, intelligent evolution. You don't have to control everything. You don't have to fix everything. You don't even have to understand everything. You only have to stop fighting. And in that stillness, something ancient begins to speak. A wisdom older than your wounds, a truth deeper than your fear, a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, and that peace, once known, becomes your home. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you stop trying to escape. And in the very act of staying, you become whole. That's the secret, that's the shift, that's the power of non-resistance. And it changes everything. Even when you stop resisting and begin to soften into presence, something lingers, an urge to figure it all out. You may have let go of control, surrendered the chase, and accepted uncertainty. But deep down, a part of you still leans forward and whispers, "Why this? Why now? Why like this?" That final question seems harmless, but it carries weight. It carries expectation. It carries the echo of an old identity, one that still believes life should be understandable, clean, linear. And that's exactly where suffering re-enters. Because some parts of life aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be entered. They're meant to be lived as a question, a koan. In Zen, a koan is not just a riddle, it's a tool of awakening, a challenge that breaks the mind's grip on logic and pulls you into presence. It's not designed to be answered. It's designed to dissolve the one asking. And what if your life, just as it is right now, is the same kind of koan? Not a problem, not a failure, but a riddle with no solution and infinite meaning. Your current situation, your discomfort, your confusion, your in-between, might be the exact shape your awakening needs to take, not to make sense, but to stretch you past the limits of your current identity. You were taught to measure progress by clarity, by movement, by goals achieved. But in spiritual practice, true growth often looks like not knowing. It feels like standing in fog, like circling the same question over and over. It's frustrating, but it's sacred. Because when your life stops making sense, your old tools stop working. And in that silence, in that surrender, something more honest begins to rise. You stop performing wisdom and begin living it. You stop chasing certainty and start noticing presence. You stop needing to be somewhere else and begin arriving fully in the middle of not knowing. The ego doesn't like this. It wants patterns. It wants cause and effect. It wants to say, this happened because of that, and feel safe. But awakening doesn't always offer that. Sometimes it only offers the moment, bare, imperfect, unresolved. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because when the story falls apart, you begin to meet life directly, without a filter. You begin to feel again. You begin to see again. Not through the lens of past and future, but through the eyes of presence. What you're going through right now might feel like a mistake, like something went off track, like life is punishing you or delaying your progress. But what if the opposite is true? What if this exact moment is where the real path begins? What if this confusion, this ache, this stillness is the doorway, not the detour? The koan of your life isn't asking you to fix it. It's asking you to sit with it, to breathe into it, to stop treating discomfort as something to overcome and start treating it as something to understand. And understanding doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with presence, with the simple, quiet act of staying. When you stop needing life to give you something different, it begins to give you something deeper. Not relief, but truth. Not clarity, but contact. You begin to feel the texture of your own experience. You begin to see that even the moments that don't make sense are woven with meaning, not always visible, but always real. The deeper you go, the less you crave resolution, because you begin to realize that peace doesn't come from having it all figured out. Peace comes from stopping the search. It comes from resting in the truth that this moment is enough. Not because it's perfect, but because it's here. And you're here. And that's all you ever needed. You don't need a better story. You don't need a new version of your life. You just need to look at what's in front of you with new eyes. With the eyes of presence. with the heart of someone who's finally stopped fighting and started listening. Because the koan of your life will never shout. It will never demand. It will only whisper. And only when you're quiet enough will you hear it say, "This, too, is sacred." The mind will still try to grasp, to explain, to label. That's okay. Let it do what it does. But don't follow it. Watch it. Love it. But don't believe everything it says, especially when it tells you you're off track. You're not off track. You're in the middle of the path, and the path just looks different now. It looks like stillness, like discomfort, like silence. But inside that silence, something is growing, something honest, something lasting. In Zen, a student can sit with a koan for years, not because they're slow, but because the point isn't to solve it. The point is to let it change them, to let it work its way through their resistance, through their beliefs, until one day the question stops being a problem. It becomes a doorway, a mirror, a companion. And in that shift, the student doesn't find an answer. They find presence. They find clarity, not in the mind, but in the body, in the breath, in the simple truth that everything they were running from was the exact thing that could set them free. Your life is doing the same. Every missed moment, every painful return, every question that won't let you go. These aren't punishments. They are openings. They are the precise shape your awakening needs to take. The edge that will crack you open. The pattern that will humble you. The riddle that will finally silence your need to solve. And in that silence, something more spacious will rise, not an answer, but a knowing, a quiet certainty that you don't need to get anywhere else, that you don't need to become anyone else, that you don't need to escape what's here. Because what's here, this moment, this breath, this ache, this stillness, it's not in the way. It is the way. The ego will keep reaching. That's okay. Let it reach, but don't follow it. Come back, again and again, to this, to now, to the koan you've been living all along, not to figure it out, but to feel it fully, to meet it with the kind of presence that doesn't need resolution, just connection. And that connection, that willingness to be with life exactly as it is, that's what dissolves ego. That's what softens the need to know. That's what opens the heart. So you don't need a breakthrough. You don't need a moment of clarity. You don't need a map. You only need this breath. You only need to stay. You only need to meet what's already here with eyes that are no longer searching, but seeing. And in that seeing, you'll find that the riddle isn't meant to be solved. It's meant to be lived, and it's always been pointing you home. Even after realizing that your life is not a mistake to solve, but a koan to meet, something deeper begins to stir. You stop resisting the shape of your experience. You stop demanding clear answers. You begin to trust the mystery. But then you look around and notice that, on the outside, nothing has changed. The same job, the same apartment, the same tension in your chest when the phone rings, and a quiet voice returns. If I'm doing all this inner work, why does everything still feel the same? That moment, where the outer world stands still but the inner world begins to tremble, is not a failure. It's a beginning, a subtle shift you can't yet see with your eyes, but you start to feel in your nervous system, in the space between thoughts, in the way you no longer react as sharply. The real change often doesn't come from what happens around you. It comes from what happens within you when you stop needing anything around you to be different. This is the turning point. When you no longer wait for life to change before you allow yourself to wake up. You start to realize that transformation was never about rearranging circumstances. It was about dissolving the lens you were looking through. Awareness is what changes everything. Not because it forces life into a better shape, but because it reveals a deeper truth already woven into what's in front of you. It's easy to believe that something outside needs to shift first, that healing begins with a new relationship, or freedom begins with a new job, or peace begins with silence. But these are only conditions, and conditions can't hold anything permanent. The kind of change that endures is the kind that happens before anything changes at all. When you wake up inside the same life you once wanted to escape and no longer feel the same urge to run, that's not stagnation, that's a breakthrough. Because now your peace isn't waiting on permission. It's arising from contact, real contact, with this breath, with this moment, with the version of you that no longer demands life feel good in order to feel alive. There's a myth that says progress should look like movement, but some of the most sacred progress can't be measured. You start to catch your thoughts before they spiral. You notice your breathing in the middle of stress. You offer a softer word in a moment that used to burn with reaction. These moments don't always feel profound, but they are, because they point to something that has shifted without needing proof. This is not about faking gratitude for a life that still aches. It's about waking up inside that ache and noticing you're no longer drowning in it. You're breathing through it. You're no longer identifying with every story your mind creates. You're no longer treating your emotions as enemies. You're learning to stay, to see, to meet what's here without needing it to prove anything. And slowly, the same life starts to feel different. Not because the people changed, not because the outcomes improved, but because you're not using those things to measure your worth anymore. You're not asking life to prove that you matter. You've already started to know it, not as an idea, but as a quiet presence that holds steady when the surface shakes. This is what spiritual practice really means. It's not about rising above the world. It's about seeing it differently, noticing the space between moments, meeting discomfort with curiosity instead of panic, and understanding that sometimes the most radical transformation is invisible. The ego resists this kind of change because it wants evidence. It wants before and after photos. It wants timelines and checklists and validation. But awareness doesn't care about timelines. It unfolds in silence, in stillness. It invites you to notice that you're not reacting the way you used to, that you're no longer ruled by the same triggers, that you're beginning to respond from somewhere else, somewhere deeper. You might still feel the same emotions, but they don't own you anymore. You might still hear the same self-critical thoughts, but they don't hold the same authority. This isn't regression. This is freedom. Not freedom from life, but freedom inside it. One of the greatest traps on the path is the belief that external change equals inner progress. But in truth, it often works the other way. When you stop needing the outside to shift, the inside begins to unfold. And that shift, however quiet, is permanent, because it's rooted in your direct experience, not in the ever-changing landscape of circumstance. So much energy is wasted waiting for the world to cooperate with our healing. But the world was never the source of your suffering. Your interpretation of it was. The pressure to be further, the comparison to someone else's timeline, the refusal to see this moment as worthy. These are the distortions that awareness heals. And once you start to see clearly, you don't need everything to change anymore. You start to meet what's in front of you with steadiness. You don't rush to fix. You don't shrink from discomfort. You begin to trust what's unfolding even if it doesn't match your preference. That trust is everything. Because once you stop needing to be somewhere else, peace finds you right where you are. The room doesn't need to be quieter. The job doesn't need to be better. The past doesn't need to be erased. Awareness doesn't erase pain, but it transforms your relationship to it. You become less identified, less gripped, more fluid. And the more present you are, the more you begin to notice the sacred inside the ordinary. The way sunlight lands on the wall, the weight of your body in the chair, the way silence speaks when you stop trying to fill it. These things don't look like transformation, but they are, because they pull you into reality. And reality, seen clearly, is enough. You don't need to keep chasing a version of yourself that finally feels good all the time. You just need to meet the version of yourself that's already here, with kindness, with patience, with the awareness that everything you need to wake up is already present. It's not later, it's now. When nothing changes on the outside but you feel lighter, don't ignore that. That's real. That's the shift. When the same day begins to feel less threatening, when you stop narrating your suffering with such intensity, when you smile for no reason, not because life got easier, but because your grip loosened, that's the transformation that lasts. This isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about realizing you don't need to understand everything for it to be okay. It's about recognizing that being fully here, even in the mess, is better than escaping to somewhere that doesn't exist. The illusion that your circumstances determine your peace is hard to let go of. But once you see through it, you'll never believe it again, because you'll have tasted the freedom of inner change, of watching your same life with new eyes, of finding the miraculous in the familiar. It's not that the world changed, it's that you woke up inside it. And that shift, quiet, patient, internal, is the one that makes all the difference. You've now seen that transformation doesn't always announce itself through visible change. Sometimes it unfolds silently, through your attention, through your breath, through your willingness to be with what is. And in that stillness, something unexpected begins to reveal itself. A deeper question starts to rise, not about your life, but about you, about who you think you are, and more importantly, who you think you're supposed to become. That quiet pressure returns. The sense that you should be further by now, kinder, wiser, more healed, more put together. It's subtle, but it hums underneath everything you do. A voice that insists, you're not quite there yet. And that voice has a goal, a better version of you, one that's more spiritual, more disciplined, more deserving of peace. But what if that version doesn't exist? What if that entire idea of self-improvement as the path to wholeness is the very thing keeping you from peace? Buddhist wisdom doesn't say, become a better you. It says, see clearly. And when you see clearly, you realize there's nothing wrong with who you are. There never was. There are just layers, stories, habits, false identities that obscure your nature. The work isn't to fix yourself. The work is to stop believing you're broken. Striving to improve is often rooted in shame, not always the loud kind. Sometimes it's subtle, a low-grade sense that something about you is off, that if you just learned more, meditated more, healed more, you'd finally arrive. But arrive where? If the goal is peace and the method is self-rejection, you will never get there, because you cannot hate yourself into awakening. The belief in a better version of you creates a future-based identity, one that keeps postponing peace until you're more evolved. That version is always just out of reach, because the mind, driven by striving, can always find something else to fix. And this loop, constant effort to become, can feel noble, it can feel spiritual, but it's just another form of ego. Ego doesn't only show up in arrogance, it shows up in constant self-improvement, in the belief that the person you are today is an obstacle to overcome. That mindset sounds productive, but in truth, it keeps you away from the intimacy of your own presence, the presence that says you are not a project, you are already whole. The most powerful transformations don't come from becoming more. They come from becoming honest. Honest enough to see that much of what you've been trying to fix in yourself was never broken to begin with. It was just unaccepted. The parts you hide, the flaws you criticize, the impulses you shame. These are not mistakes in your design. They're invitations to soften, to love, to include. The path isn't about becoming something else. It's about remembering who you were before you started believing you weren't enough. That remembering happens not through effort, but through attention. When you sit with yourself long enough without trying to change, something gentle unfolds. You begin to notice your own breath without judgment. You begin to feel your emotions without shame. You begin to speak more truthfully, not because you trained yourself to, but because you stopped pretending. That's what it means to return to yourself, not as a polished version, but as the unguarded, unfiltered truth, the one who doesn't need to be enlightened to be worthy of love. There is nothing wrong with growth, but when growth is driven by self-rejection, it doesn't liberate, it exhausts. It becomes another way to postpone your life, another way to stay at war with your own being, and even when you reach a milestone, the satisfaction fades, because the voice that demanded more still whispers, "You could be better." You cannot build peace on a foundation of not enough. The desire to improve often carries the hidden belief that your worth is conditional, that if you achieve enough, you'll finally deserve rest. But rest is not a reward. It's your right. You don't have to earn your own peace. You only have to stop resisting it. Many spiritual paths fall into this trap, promising a perfected version of you if you just do enough practice, enough surrender, enough letting go. But Buddhism invites you to question the one who is doing all the effort. Who is the self that needs to become enlightened? And when you look deeply enough, you find that self doesn't actually exist. The self is a process, a collection of habits, memories, emotions, and stories. It isn't a thing, it isn't stable, and so trying to perfect it is like trying to polish a cloud. It keeps shifting, because it was never solid to begin with. Instead of trying to become better, try becoming more present. That shift changes everything. When you're present, you don't need to be better. You need to be real. And when you're real, connection happens, healing happens. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped blocking it. This is the paradox. The less you strive, the more you change. Because change doesn't require effort, it requires honesty. The honesty to meet yourself here, as you are, and to say, I'm not waiting to love this, I'm loving it now. You've already been shaped by life in ways you can't undo. The softness you've gained didn't come from achievement. It came from staying present through difficulty. The compassion you've developed didn't arrive when you became better. It arrived when you suffered, when you hurt, when you stopped running from what you felt. That's the real you. The one who stayed, the one who endured, the one who kept breathing even when nothing made sense. Don't trade that truth for a fantasy of improvement. You don't need to be more spiritual. You don't need to be more productive. You don't need to fix your past, perfect your habits, or have it all figured out. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. Stop treating this version of you as a rough draft. This is it. This is the version that's living, feeling, growing. You are not a temporary version waiting for the real one to show up. This is the one who matters. And once you stop chasing something better, you begin to uncover something deeper. You begin to feel peace in the breath you already have. You begin to experience joy in the ordinary things. You begin to laugh more easily, cry more freely, rest more fully. Not because you earned it, but because you stopped withholding it. There's a softness in this realization, a return, not to who you used to be, but to who you've always been, underneath the effort. That self is not perfect, but it is real, it is kind, it is enough, and in the end, no one is waiting for you to become a better version. They're waiting for you to be more you, the honest you, the steady you, the one who no longer needs to prove anything to be at peace. That's the awakening. And it begins not when you become someone else. It begins when you stop trying to. So you've finally stopped chasing the future. You've dropped the idea that you need to be someone else in order to be worthy of peace. You've let go of the story that you're a project waiting to be completed. And in the stillness that follows, something else begins to rise. Not a goal, not a plan, but a quiet realization. This moment is not random. It isn't filler. It isn't a pause between where you were and where you hope to go. This moment is alive. It's designed with care. It's not just happening, it's happening for a reason. And the reason isn't external. It has nothing to do with outcomes or timing or luck. It has to do with your soul, not in some grand mystical sense, but in a simple truth. The part of you that is deeper than personality, deeper than ambition, deeper than memory. That part knows exactly what it's here to meet. And somehow, without needing your permission, life has arranged itself to deliver the exact set of conditions for that meeting to occur. There's a precision to the present that the mind can't comprehend. The mind sees what's missing, what didn't work, what should have happened by now. But the soul doesn't deal in timelines. The soul deals in readiness, and when your inner world is finally prepared to resolve what's been left open, the present moment arrives carrying the very shape of that resolution. It might not look how you wanted. It might not feel gentle, but it's exact. Every person in your life right now, every delay, every silence, every question you keep circling, none of it is random. It's all part of a pattern unfolding with quiet intelligence. A pattern designed not for your comfort, but for your clarity. Buddhism teaches that everything arises from causes and conditions. Nothing appears out of nowhere. Nothing is accidental. And so, the moment you're in right now, this one, is the result of 1,000 threads. Some you can trace. Most you cannot. Some belong to your choices. Others belong to the karma of lifetimes. But all of it converges here. And when you meet that truth without resistance, something opens. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this showing me?" You begin to see that the very things you thought were mistakes are doorways. The people who trigger you are mirrors. The things you've been waiting on were never meant to arrive until something inside you was ready to hold them differently. There's no punishment in this design, only precision. Life isn't trying to prove a point. It's trying to help you remember something you forgot while reaching, something you lost while performing, something buried under years of distraction. And now, life has brought you the exact environment to bring it to the surface. Not all lessons feel noble. Some feel like loneliness. Some feel like loss. Some feel like nothing is happening at all. But still, the teaching continues. Because healing doesn't always look like breakthroughs. Sometimes it looks like sitting with the part of you that's tired of striving. Sometimes it looks like resting inside your ordinary day and noticing that peace isn't as far as you thought. You're not here by accident, and you're not in this phase of your life because you failed. You're here because there's something here you're meant to resolve. Maybe it's forgiveness, maybe it's truth-telling, maybe it's remembering how to be still without guilt, or how to receive without proving, or how to feel without apologizing. Whatever it is, this moment is tailored to it. Life knows how to wrap truth in the disguise of repetition. It knows how to bring you back to the same conversation, the same pattern, the same tension. Not because you're stuck, but because the lesson is still alive, and it won't leave until it's seen. You've already spent enough time running from this moment, trying to edit it, trying to fast forward through it. But now, something in you knows there's nowhere else to be. And that knowing is the beginning of freedom, because once you stop needing this moment to change, you begin to change in it. The present is not a placeholder, it's a container. It holds exactly what your heart is prepared to touch. Even if you don't feel prepared, even if you still resist it, the moment was chosen not by chance, but by necessity. A necessity born from love, not comfort, but truth. You don't have to love what's happening to trust that it belongs. You don't have to feel peaceful to know that peace is available. You only have to meet the moment with honesty, with presence, with the willingness to stop labeling this as not it. Because this is it, not forever, but for now. And for now is all life ever gives you. When you begin to see the moment as chosen, for you, not against you, you stop fighting it. You start listening. And when you listen closely, even pain begins to speak. Not in riddles, but in clarity. It says, "There's something here you're finally strong enough to feel. There's something here you're finally quiet enough to hear." This isn't about resignation. It's about recognition. recognizing that the soul doesn't speak in words, it speaks in patterns. It speaks through longing, through restlessness, through fatigue, through joy. And when you follow those signals with awareness, the present begins to feel less like a trap and more like a map. You might not know where it's leading, but you can trust what it's revealing. It's revealing what still hurts, what still waits, what still holds your breath hostage. And little by little, it's loosening that grip. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to soften the story that you're behind, enough to silence the belief that you need to catch up, enough to remind you that your timeline is not broken. It's sacred, even when it feels slow, even when it feels still, even when no one else understands. You don't need to explain why you're here. You only need to be here, fully, gently, with the kind of attention that says, I may not know why this hurts, but I know it's asking to be met. I may not know what's next, but I know this is where I'm supposed to be. That level of presence rewrites everything. It allows healing to unfold without urgency. It allows truth to rise without resistance. It allows you to belong to your life again, without needing it to look different first. This moment was not chosen at random. It carries your fingerprint. It reflects your readiness. It contains the exact ingredients needed for the next piece of your becoming. So let it teach you, let it hold you, let it change you, not into someone better, but into someone more whole. Because the version of you that's here now isn't waiting to be replaced, it's waiting to be remembered. And once you remember that, the moment becomes enough. And so do you. Once you begin to see that the present moment was not random, not punishment, but perfectly tailored to your inner unfolding, something shifts. You stop trying to escape. You stop asking when things will finally start. Because you realize they already have, right here, right now. The healing, the integration, the remembering, it's all happening in the present. But then something else begins to stir beneath that clarity. A quieter truth, one that runs against everything you were taught to value. What if moving forward isn't always the answer? What if continuing is not always strength? What if sometimes stopping fully, deliberately, without shame, is the most powerful thing you can do? We live in a world obsessed with becoming, with climbing, with earning. The path is often mistaken for acceleration, for scaling higher versions of yourself. But the deepest transformations do not happen in motion. They happen in stillness, not in striving, but in stopping. Stopping is not giving up. It is coming home. Not just to the body or to the breath, but to truth. It's the moment you stop pushing against the current and realize you're already standing in the river. It's the instant when you drop the burden of always needing to do more, and you begin to see clearly that nothing more needs to be done for this moment to matter. You've been told that rest is what happens after you've proven yourself, that stillness is something you earn. But Buddhism teaches something far more radical, that stopping is not a break from the path. It is the path. It's not what you do once you're healed. It's how you begin to heal. By ceasing the habit of outrunning yourself. By letting go of the belief that peace is a reward and recognizing that it's been quietly waiting under every layer of effort. In the West, ambition is often praised. Movement is glorified. To stop is to be seen as lazy, uncertain, lost. But the art of stopping is not about weakness. It is about the rare courage it takes to break the trance of endless doing. It takes real clarity to pause when momentum tells you to continue. It takes depth to recognize that rushing forward might actually be leading you away from yourself. Stopping means listening, not just to silence, but to what's underneath the noise. The tension in your shoulders, the grief in your chest, the voice inside that's been asking for attention, not validation. When you stop, you can finally hear that voice. You can hear what your body has been holding. You can hear what your spirit has been waiting to say. These messages are quiet. They don't shout. They arrive in moments of stillness that ambition never gives you time to feel. Many people fear stopping because they associate it with quitting. But there is a vast difference between quitting out of fear and stopping out of wisdom. Quitting says, "I'm not enough." Stopping says, "I've done enough." Quitting is reactive. Stopping is responsive. One comes from panic, the other from presence. To pause is not to fail, it is to recalibrate. To step back from the noise and remember why you were walking in the first place. It's a return to intention, to the kind of clarity that can't be accessed when you're constantly chasing. Stillness is not the absence of growth, it's the soil in which real growth begins. When you stop long enough to feel what's here, you might discover you've been running on beliefs that no longer serve you, that you've been climbing ladders that lead nowhere, that you've been saying yes to things that shrink you. In stopping, you begin to see what's been false, not to judge yourself, but to free yourself, because you can't see clearly while you're moving too fast. There is a Zen story about a man who asked his teacher, "What is the path to enlightenment?" The teacher replied, "Stop, sit down, be still." That was the whole instruction, not because movement is wrong, but because stillness is where illusion falls apart. When you stop, the masks fall, the roles dissolve, the ambition fades, and what remains is truth. Not a flashy truth, but a quiet one. The truth of who you are without effort. The part of you that isn't defined by what you achieve or fix or overcome. This doesn't mean you'll never move again, but it means that when you do move, it will come from wholeness, not from lack, from clarity, not conditioning, from depth, not desperation. The act of stopping breaks the cycle of unconscious striving. It gives you the space to remember that you are not a machine. You are not here to keep performing until you collapse. You are not here to constantly improve. You are here to feel, to wake up, to return. And in that return, something sacred happens. You begin to relate to time differently. You stop measuring your worth by your productivity. You stop organizing your day around what can be accomplished and start asking what needs to be felt, what needs to be honored, what needs to be released. Stopping is a form of devotion, a bow to the present moment, a surrender that says, "I trust life enough to rest inside it." That kind of trust cannot be forced. It must be cultivated. It must be remembered over and over, each time you feel the urge to fill the space, to chase the next goal, to prove your value again. In Buddhist practice, this kind of stopping is called cessation. It is not the end of your path. It is the sacred pause that allows your path to become conscious. Without it, you're just reacting. With it, you're actually living. When you stop, you become sensitive again to beauty, to pain, to the parts of yourself you've silenced in the name of progress. And in that sensitivity, there is awakening, not dramatic, not immediate, but steady. It's the awakening of gentleness, of honesty, of choosing presence over performance. You don't need a crisis to justify your stillness. You don't need to break before you give yourself permission to stop. You can pause simply because you are ready to meet yourself again. That is the real power, the kind that doesn't come from climbing, but from grounding, the kind that doesn't come from acquiring, but from releasing, the kind that knows nothing you do will ever be as valuable as the awareness you bring to it. So pause, not just once. Pause as practice. Pause before you say yes. Pause when the pressure builds. Pause when your worth feels threatened. Pause when you forget you're already enough. And in that pause, feel your life again, because the point was never to get ahead. The point was to wake up. And sometimes the clearest step forward is the choice to stop. After everything you've tried to hold, after the effort, the striving, the pushing forward, and even the gentle decision to stop, something becomes clear. You've dropped the illusion that movement is always progress. You've rested in the power of stillness. You've let go of becoming someone better. You've started to trust the moment, even when it doesn't offer what you thought you needed. And now a deeper truth begins to rise. Not another thing to do, not another goal to reach, but a shift in perception so profound it dissolves the foundation of everything you once believed. What if the reason this moment is enough isn't because it's full, but because it's empty? In Buddhist thought, there is a word that many avoid, but it holds the key to everything: shunyata, emptiness. At first it can sound cold, void, lifeless. But emptiness, as the Buddha taught it, is not the absence of meaning. It's the absence of fixed meaning. It's the understanding that nothing you experience has an independent, permanent essence. And because of that, everything is possible. Everything is free. Everything is open to be seen, to be touched, to be understood as it truly is, without distortion. You may look at your life and see imperfection. You may see loss, delay, silence. You may wonder if this is really where you're meant to be. But through the lens of emptiness, you begin to understand. This moment has no fixed identity. It is not flawed or complete. It simply is. And that is its perfection. Not a static kind of perfection, but a living one. A perfection that comes from its openness, from its spaciousness, from the fact that it cannot be defined and therefore cannot be wrong. When you see your life through the filter of labels, you limit it. You judge it as good or bad, right or wrong, enough or not enough. But when you begin to rest in the truth of emptiness, you realize that all of those judgments were temporary. They were thoughts. They were not the thing itself. The thing itself, the moment, the feeling, the breath, was never the problem. It was the story around it that created suffering. Emptiness isn't a void to be filled. It's the space in which clarity appears. It is the groundless nature of everything you experience. And in that groundlessness, freedom becomes possible. Because nothing is stuck, nothing is trapped in what it used to mean. Not your past, not your pain, not even your identity. The most painful parts of life often feel so heavy because we assign them permanence. We say, "This is who I am now." This is what my life has become. But emptiness reminds you, nothing is fixed. Not your sadness, not your success, not your roles, not even your name. Everything is in motion. Everything is arising, existing, and passing away. And when you see this, not as an idea, but as a direct experience, suffering begins to soften. You begin to understand that what once felt solid is actually fluid, that what felt final is still unfolding. You see that what looked like failure was just a moment in a longer pattern, a breath, a movement, a wave, not a definition. Even the thoughts you've had about yourself, the ones you've repeated for years, I'm too this, I'm not enough that, those too are empty, not meaningless, but not inherently true. They are constructs, echoes. They can be seen, and if they can be seen, they are not you. You are the space they arise in. The teaching of emptiness doesn't require you to renounce life. It asks you to meet it with fresh eyes, to see the people in your life not through the filter of what they did or didn't do, but as ever-changing beings, just like you, shifting moment by moment. To see your situation not as a verdict, but as a wave in the ocean of conditions. To see your emotions not as truth, but as temporary weather patterns passing through a vast and open sky. Shunyata is not cold, it is compassion itself, because when nothing is fixed, forgiveness becomes possible. Rebirth becomes possible, stillness becomes spacious, and even grief becomes a teacher, not because it disappears, but because you no longer define yourself by it. This moment right now is not what you think it is. It's not what you've named it. It's not what you've decided it should be. It's empty of your ideas. And because of that, it's full of possibility, not in a future tense, but in the sense that you can finally meet it as it is, free from your projections. This moment is not weighed down by your past unless you carry that weight. This breath doesn't carry your story unless you attach it. Emptiness means you can return, you can begin again. You can see your life without the lens of disappointment or longing. Just this, just now, just awareness meeting what is. When you truly see emptiness, even the smallest details start to shine. A sound, a smell, the way your hands move, the fact that you're still here, breathing, aware. And suddenly you understand why this teaching is at the center of the path. Not because it erases you, but because it frees you. There is a deep relief in realizing you don't have to carry the identity you built. You don't have to uphold the roles that exhaust you. You don't have to keep chasing the version of yourself that the world applauds, because you were never that fixed person to begin with. You were always space, awareness, movement, a dance of conditions, light and sound and memory and hope and breath. And in that dance there's room for it all. There's room for confusion, there's room for stillness, there's room for grief and joy, sorrow and laughter, silence and song. You are not trying to get somewhere anymore. You are not trying to become something better. You are here, watching this unfold, and it is enough. Emptiness doesn't mean nothing matters. It means nothing is bound. And when nothing is bound, everything can be met with kindness. You can meet your fear not with analysis, but with space. You can meet your anger not with shame, but with understanding. You can meet your longing not with urgency, but with breath. That is why this is the right place, because it is the only place where anything real can happen. Not because it looks like success, not because it matches your vision board, but because it holds nothing that must be resisted. This place, this moment, is empty of inherent identity. But it is full of meaning when met with presence. And in that presence, the search ends. Not because you found what you were looking for, but because you remembered you were never lost. After seeing the world through the lens of emptiness, something in you softens. You stop holding so tightly. You stop assigning permanent meaning to things. You start to trust the openness of the present. You begin to feel that even when things are uncertain or incomplete, they are still whole. But in that openness, something else comes to the surface, something quieter, harder to admit, a feeling that often goes unspoken. Loneliness. It slips in when you've stopped running, when the distractions fall away, when the crowd thins, when the phone is silent. It enters the space you've made through awareness, and at first it feels like a regression, like something is wrong. But what if nothing is wrong? What if this moment of being alone isn't a step back? It's the next step forward. Loneliness is not a failure of connection. It is the first invitation to meet yourself. Not the version you present to others, not the self you manage through roles or goals, the deeper one, the one that remains when everything else is quiet. We often think solitude means something went wrong, that it means you're not lovable, not understood, not included. But Buddhism invites a different understanding. Solitude is not exile, it is training, a space where clarity can finally land, a space where the noise of the world has softened just enough that your real voice can rise. You were taught to fear loneliness. You were taught that your value is reflected back to you through other people, that attention means worth, that being wanted means you are enough. But those are fragile mirrors, easily cracked. And the deeper truth is this: the clarity you are seeking, the peace you've been working for, it doesn't need an audience. It needs space, honest space, empty space, the kind of space that only solitude offers. Sitting alone is not passive. It's not waiting for someone or something to fill the gap. It's the practice of facing your own mind, of listening without interruption, of remembering the parts of you that don't speak when the room is full. Loneliness becomes suffering when it's paired with resistance, when you believe you shouldn't be feeling it, when you assume it's a symptom of being broken or behind. But when you stop resisting it, when you sit with it like a teacher instead of a threat, it begins to open. It starts to reveal its layers. Beneath the ache, there is presence. Beneath the presence, there is stillness. Beneath the stillness, there is clarity. Solitude is the environment that makes self-understanding possible. In the absence of distraction, your patterns become visible. You see the stories you've been repeating. You hear the tone of your own inner dialogue. You feel the way your body tenses out of habit. This is not always pleasant, but it's honest, and honesty is the beginning of healing. When you sit with yourself long enough, something else happens. Your need for external validation starts to weaken. You stop chasing approval. You stop looking for your reflection in someone else's eyes. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you've remembered something more stable. You've remembered the quiet enoughness of simply being. Loneliness is often mislabeled. It's not always a lack of people. Sometimes it's a lack of presence with yourself. You can be surrounded and still feel empty, or you can be alone and feel full. The difference isn't the crowd. It's your contact with the present moment. When you're fully here, even in solitude, there's richness, there's nuance, there's life. The discomfort of being alone is not a sign to escape. It's a signal to go deeper, to ask what's there, to wonder what parts of you haven't been listened to because the noise was too loud. When you stop turning away from your own company, you discover a kind of companionship that doesn't need reassurance. You find the part of you that doesn't collapse when attention is withdrawn. This is strength, not the kind the world rewards, but the kind that endures. The path of awakening often leads through solitude, not because you're meant to be isolated, but because certain lessons can't be learned in the presence of others. Some realizations need space. Some truths won't speak unless it's just you and the quiet. In that space, you start to feel what you've avoided. You grieve what was never acknowledged. You hear the questions you've postponed. You remember what matters to you, not what you were told should matter, but what actually does. Solitude strips you down, but it doesn't leave you empty. It clears the space where something more honest can grow. Even your restlessness has something to show you. That twitch to reach for your phone, that itch to scroll, to call, to fill the gap. If you sit with it, not judge it, just sit, it begins to soften. And behind it, there's a small, steady voice that says, "You're okay. You've always been okay." The longer you sit, the clearer things become. You notice what's real versus what's reflex. You begin to see how much of your movement was driven by fear, how much of your effort was shaped by the need to not be alone. And once you see it, you have a choice. You can continue performing, or you can begin returning to the kind of presence that doesn't need to be seen to be valid, the kind that doesn't shrink in silence, the kind that doesn't panic when the text doesn't come or the plan falls through. Solitude becomes powerful when it stops being a reaction and becomes a choice. It becomes your anchor, your mirror, your reminder. You learn that peace is not in another person's voice, it's in your own breath. And once you can rest in that, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop trying to earn belonging through noise. You begin to belong to yourself. And when you belong to yourself, everything changes. Not because you've shut out the world, but because you've remembered that the world cannot give you what you refuse to give yourself: attention, presence, understanding, love. The lesson in loneliness is not how to avoid it. It's how to enter it without losing your center, how to meet yourself without flinching, how to sit in silence without needing it to end. And from that sitting, something rises. Not pride, not certainty, but clarity. A knowing that doesn't rely on circumstances. A softness that doesn't demand anything from others. A wholeness that does not disappear in the quiet. That's what solitude offers. Not escape, but return. Not punishment, but preparation. Not isolation, but deep, grounded presence with the only person who's been here through every chapter, yourself. Once you've sat with yourself long enough, once you've passed through the discomfort of your own silence, you begin to see something that once felt impossible. You are not waiting to become someone else. You are not waiting for your life to begin. You are here, and this is your life, and for perhaps the first time, you're not rushing to outrun it. But even in that clarity, another voice still lingers beneath the peace. A quieter belief that somehow you're behind, that you should have done more by now, that your timing is off, that you've missed your chance. This belief is so subtle, so common, that most don't even realize it's there. It hides behind ambition. It hides behind comparison. It disguises itself as motivation. But beneath it lies an ache, a quiet fear that your life is not where it's supposed to be. But what if that fear is based on a false measurement? What if behind and ahead were illusions? What if the only real time you've ever had is this moment, and the moment itself has never once been late? Buddhist insight teaches that the concept of time is something the mind creates. It organizes memories, projects into the future, and then uses those projections to judge the now. But life doesn't follow the mind's timelines. It unfolds according to causes and conditions, and those conditions are infinite. No one else has your exact karma, your exact experiences, your exact position in this moment. So how could you be behind anyone? The feeling that you're late is born from comparison, but you are not living someone else's path. You are not here to catch up. You are not a copy of anyone else's life, so their timing has nothing to do with yours. When you deeply understand this, something inside begins to relax. You stop holding your breath. You stop waiting for permission. You start seeing that your life didn't begin when you hit a milestone. It began when you started paying attention. The pace you've taken has not been a mistake. Even your pauses were part of the rhythm. Even your stillness was part of the unfolding. Even the moments you thought were wasted were building something you couldn't yet see. Because growth doesn't always look like momentum. Sometimes it looks like integration. Sometimes it looks like healing you didn't realize you needed. Sometimes it looks like rest, so that when the next door opens, you're strong enough to walk through it. There is a kind of suffering that comes from believing you've missed something, a life, a relationship, a purpose. But when you view the path through the eyes of Dharma, you begin to see that everything arrives precisely when the conditions are ready, not when the ego wants it, not when society expects it, but when your soul has opened enough to meet it. You may think you should have known certain truths earlier, but the version of you back then was not ready to hold them. And that's not failure, that's respect. Life doesn't give you more than your current awareness can hold. It waits, it invites, it brings the teaching again and again, not to shame you, but to gently prepare you. The reason you're encountering what you're encountering now is because now is the first moment you're truly able to hold it. The delay wasn't denial, it was preparation. It was space being made, quietly and patiently, for what was always meant to arrive. This realization unhooks you from the race. The race to accomplish, to prove, to earn your place. There is no finish line, there is no start line, there is only breath. And inside that breath, your life unfolds, not as something to chase, but as something to receive. When you stop viewing your life as a schedule, you begin to see it as a living process. One that breathes, that shifts, that pauses when needed and surges when ready. You begin to trust your own unfolding, not blindly, but wisely, not passively, but patiently. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop asking if you're late, when you stop using age, progress, or others' lives as measurements. That peace is not complacency, it is presence. It is the freedom to walk your path at your pace, knowing that anything truly meant for you will meet you exactly when you are able to hold it. And this is not just spiritual optimism, It is observation. Think of all the times something didn't happen when you wanted it, and later you were grateful it hadn't. Think of the doors that didn't open because you weren't ready to walk through them with integrity. Think of the relationships that ended, not because you failed, but because you were being rerouted towards something truer. We often romanticize the idea of perfect timing as if it's something we must find. But it's not found. It's noticed. It's not controlled. It's honored. It happens not when the clock aligns, but when your awareness deepens, when your energy meets the moment with honesty. Every time you say, "I should be further by now," you are denying the perfection of now. You are rejecting the very conditions that were crafted by your own life force. But when you soften that voice, when you begin to trust the intelligence of where you are, even the waiting becomes sacred. Even the pause becomes a teaching. Right timing isn't just about when things happen. It's about how you meet what's happening. It's the internal readiness that cannot be faked. It's the presence that replaces panic. It's the grace that arrives when you stop rushing and start listening. If you feel like nothing is happening, look closer. Maybe something is maturing inside you. Maybe your values are shifting. Maybe your capacity for peace is deepening. These changes are invisible at first, but they are real. And they are often more important than anything the outside world can measure. We are conditioned to value speed, to reward early success, to fear being behind. But the Dharma doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't run out of time. It simply unfolds. One step, one breath, one moment at a time. You cannot be late for your own unfolding. You cannot miss what is truly aligned. You can only delay your ability to receive it. And even then, life waits. It waits with patience. It waits with wisdom. It never shames you. It never punishes you. It simply continues to offer. And when you are ready, not perfect but present, you begin to notice that everything is arriving right on time. Not always according to plan, but always according to truth. So if you're feeling behind, pause, not to catch up, but to come back. Come back to the moment that never left you. Come back to the breath that asks for nothing but your awareness. Come back to the knowing that your life has always been waiting for you, not to improve, but to return. Return to the trust that your timing is not broken, that your rhythm is not wrong, that your life is not delayed. It is unfolding, and your only job is to be here for it. After you've seen that your timing has never been wrong, that nothing has been missed, and nowhere is behind, something begins to shift in how you view your own life. Not the future version of it, not the one shaped by vision boards or imagined successes, but the life you're living right now, the job you show up to, the daily responsibilities you carry, the ordinary roles you play that often go unnoticed. And a quiet question surfaces beneath the clarity. What if this isn't just maintenance? What if this isn't just something I'm doing until my real life begins? We're taught to believe that meaning lives in titles, prestige, and recognition. That purpose is something you finally discover after arriving at a better version of yourself. But the deeper teachings point elsewhere. They point to the unnoticed, the mundane, the background roles, the tasks that require no applause, and they ask, what if this, exactly this, is your compassion in motion? You don't have to be a teacher in robes or a healer on a stage to live a life of deep service. Some of the most powerful acts of compassion are hidden inside the roles that seem the most ordinary, making someone else's day easier, holding space without needing credit, cleaning, caring, carrying weight others don't see. These things don't look glamorous, but their impact runs deep. In Buddhism, the path of the Bodhisattva is the path of service, not in grand gestures, but in humble consistency, not in what looks spiritual, but in what nourishes the moment. The roles you play right now, no matter how unremarkable they seem, might be doing exactly that. The mistake comes when we label parts of our life as less than. We say, "This is just a job," or "I'm just a parent," or "I'm only here because I have to be." But underneath those stories is a truth waiting to be seen, that your current situation is not meaningless. It is karmically placed. It is a living opportunity to show up with care, to turn attention into devotion, to bring presence where there is usually absence. The reason this role matters is not because it defines you, but because it gives you a space to express awareness in action, not just in what you do, but in how you do it, with patience, with integrity, with a willingness to give even when no one is watching. What makes a role compassionate isn't its outcome, it's the energy behind it. Are you rushing through it, or are you present for it? Are you waiting for something better, or are you pouring care into what's already here? Compassion is not always a feeling, it's a posture, a way of moving through the world that turns even routine acts into offerings. When you answer the phone, when you restock the shelf, when you wash the dish, when you take care of what others overlook, these can be acts of love if they're done with presence. And it's not just about what you're doing, it's about how your doing shapes the world around you. Your presence calms the room, your kindness shifts someone's day, your steadiness makes others feel safe. These things are easy to dismiss because they don't come with applause, but they are felt deeply. The ego looks for roles that impress, the heart looks for places it can serve, and sometimes the most powerful service is invisible. Sometimes it looks like showing up when you'd rather leave. Sometimes it looks like staying patient in a conversation no one else would tolerate. Sometimes it looks like returning to the same job, not because it's your dream, but because someone else depends on your care. That kind of service doesn't always feel good, but it's real, and it creates karma, not as punishment or reward, but as momentum. Quiet, steady momentum that shapes the world more than ambition ever could. We're taught to find meaning in what stands out. But what if meaning is found in what we consistently return to? What if your presence, offered again and again without needing to be seen, is the most sacred thing you're giving right now? This isn't about settling. It's about seeing. Seeing that you're not just passing time. You're transmitting energy. You're offering stillness in places that are frantic. You're planting patience in places that are hurried. You're bringing care where it would otherwise be missing. And you're doing it without a title, without a spotlight, without a reward. That is what makes it powerful. Sometimes your current role is not about achievement. It's about refinement. It's where your edges soften, where your old identity dies quietly, where your ego is humbled and your awareness is sharpened. That transformation doesn't come from changing your situation. It comes from seeing your situation through different eyes. Not the eyes that say, "I should be doing more," but the eyes that say, "What I'm doing now holds more than I thought." Even if the work is repetitive, even if it feels unnoticed, even if no one acknowledges it, your presence changes it. This isn't spiritual romanticism, it's practical dharma. The moment you stop trying to escape your current role and start entering it with mindfulness, everything changes. Not outwardly, perhaps, but inwardly, profoundly. You begin to feel integrity again. You begin to remember that you don't need a new role to be more compassionate. You need a new relationship with the role you already have. Even if it's not forever, it is for now. And if it is for now, it is sacred. Because right now is the only time you ever have to meet the world with your full attention. What if you stopped calling your work small? What if you stopped seeing your life as a placeholder? What if the very things you do each day are the exact karmic threads being woven into the greater cloth of awakening? There is a beauty in the roles we tend to minimize. They ground us, they remind us of interconnection. They show us that the path is not only found in retreat or revelation, but in routine, in rhythm, in the way we care when we don't have to. The Dharma is not far away. It's in the room you clean, the body you care for, the task you finish, the phone call you return with patience, the way you speak to the one person who tests your limits every day. And if it's all part of the practice, then nothing is beneath you. Nothing is outside the path. Nothing is wasted. This moment, this role, this breath, it's not ordinary. It's karmic compassion in disguise. When you begin to see your present role not as a placeholder, but as a living expression of compassion, something else quietly begins to shift. A deeper softening. A recognition that maybe this life you're living, the one with all its unpolished edges and unfinished corners, is not a delay. It's not a detour, it's the actual path. But even as that truth lands, another old voice returns, softer now, but still persistent, the voice that says it could have been different. It was supposed to look another way. I should have ended up somewhere else. This idea is subtle but powerful. It follows you in quiet moments. It compares you to your younger self's dreams, to other people's progress, to the image of a life that seems like it was somehow lost. And without realizing it, you start living next to your life instead of in it. You start grieving a version of the past that never existed. You begin to wonder if you've missed the better story. That story, the one where things worked out differently, is what the mind clings to when the present feels uncertain. It creates alternate lives, versions of you that chose differently, succeeded faster, loved more boldly, avoided the pain. And while these versions can feel comforting or motivating, they can also quietly drain you, because in their shadow, your real life starts to feel like a mistake. Buddhist awareness doesn't ask you to reject those thoughts. It asks you to see them clearly, to notice that the mind's projection of the life I should have had is not truth. It's habit. It's an echo of craving. Craving for control, craving for certainty, craving for a life that hurts less or proves more. But craving always leads to suffering, not because longing is wrong, but because it's tied to an illusion that somewhere out there a better version of life was waiting for you, and you missed it. The truth is, that version never existed. It was a mental projection, a composite of desires, fears, comparisons, and cultural conditioning. It was built from fragments, and no matter how vivid it feels, It was never real. What's real is here, this breath, this moment, this life. When you begin to release the fantasy of alternate lives, something unexpected happens. You stop mourning what never was. You stop blaming yourself for choices that could not have been made differently. You begin to realize that everything in your path, the detours, the relationships, the pauses, the quiet, wasn't blocking your life. It was shaping it. This doesn't mean everything happened for a cosmic reason. It means that everything happened because it did. And now you're here. And here is not wrong. When you believe there's a version of life that would have been better, you fracture your attention. Part of you remains tethered to a ghost. You begin to withhold presence from the life you actually have. You miss the texture of now because you're busy imagining something else. That imagination isn't harmless. It creates distance from your own heart, from the people around you, from the opportunities that are quietly knocking but can't be heard through the noise of regret. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel the tenderness of not becoming who you thought you'd be. But once that grief is honored, it's also okay to let it go. Not to betray your past self, but to honor the self that's here now. The one who kept going, the one who learned, the one who can still love and listen and soften. Mindful awareness doesn't erase longing. It simply brings it into the light. It lets you hold that longing with care and say, I see you, and I choose to stay. Not because the fantasy wasn't appealing, but because the real life you're in is the only one that can be touched. It's the only one where awakening can happen. Not the life that never came. Not the one that lives in imagination. This one. The more you live in awareness, the more the illusion of alternate lives begins to dissolve. Not in a sudden way, but gradually. You begin to feel less tempted by what if. You begin to smile more at what is. You stop measuring your worth by how well your life matches the blueprint you once sketched in your mind. And in that shift, there's freedom, because when there is no better version of your life waiting somewhere else, you stop waiting. You begin participating. You begin saying yes to the quiet morning, to the unglamorous task, to the perfectly imperfect reality of being human. This doesn't mean you stop dreaming or setting goals. It means your goals stop being driven by the fear of missing something. They start coming from a place of presence, of truth, of real alignment. You don't need to abandon your life to find purpose. You don't need to swap your story for someone else's. You only need to notice that the life you're in is still alive, and it's offering you moments, one after another. Moments that don't match the dream, but surpass it, if you're present enough to notice. Comparison loses its grip when you stop needing validation, when you stop imagining that someone else's life would fix what you're feeling. You begin to realize that the only place healing ever happens is in the life you're living now. This is where joy is, not dramatic, Instagram-worthy joy, but subtle, stable, grounded joy. The kind that grows not from fantasy, but from contact. The kind that arises when you stop measuring your life and start meeting it. Every time you return to now, you reclaim a part of yourself. Every time you breathe through the impulse to reach for a different version of life, you come home. You remember that presence isn't a reward for figuring it out. It's the beginning of everything. There are no alternate lives. There is only this one. And this one, however incomplete it feels, is whole. Not because it's easy, not because it matches the picture, but because it's real, and real is where love lives. Real is where growth happens. Real is where you finally stop performing and start being. You don't need the life you imagined. You need the life you can touch, and it's already here. So now you've heard it, all of it. The delays, the stillness, the detours, the loneliness, the longing, the peace that rises not from perfection, but from presence. Every teaching pointed back to the same unshakable truth. You are not lost. You are not behind. You are not off path. You are exactly where you need to be. Not because everything is easy, but because everything is alive with meaning when seen through awareness. The job you thought didn't matter, the emotion you wished would go away, the moment you believed was a mistake. All of it has been part of the unfolding. All of it. A mirror, a koan, a call to stop running and start seeing. And now, here you are, not chasing, not fixing, just resting, just breathing, just beginning to believe that your life isn't waiting to start. It already has. If even one of these truths landed in your heart, drop a comment below and simply write, "I'm exactly where I need to be." Let it be your declaration, your release, your quiet bow to the present moment. If you want more wisdom like this, more reminders of who you already are, subscribe to the channel. And when you do, tap the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Until then, rest. You're not late. You're right on time.